I'll go ahead and call us to order at 7:01, and we will open with public comment. So let's go ahead and take, sorry, dealing with Windows here, Scott first, and then Mimi, and then Penelope, please. Scott, are you there?
His hand went down, so I'm just trying to find him in the list.
In the list.
All right, I found him. Okay, here you go. Here's Scott.
Thank you. Hi, Scott.
Okay, so you can hear me?
Mm-hmm.
See me?
Sorry, Scott. Yes, we can hear you. Before you get started, I just wanted to say we're going to try to keep, since we do have a few people who want to talk tonight and we want to not be here for 4 hours, all of us collectively. So I'm going to ask public comments to keep to a 2-minute time limit in the interest of moving us through everybody, okay?
Sounds good to me.
Awesome. Thanks, Scott.
My name's Scott Drysdale. Sorry, my voice is not quite all here. Resident of Hanover, Emeritus Professor of Computer Science at Dartmouth. I've been told that the board has been considering dropping German 1 for the upcoming school year and wanted to make a comment on that I think that's a bad idea. My own experience is I took German in high school because I was told it would be good for being a scientist. And while computer science publishes everything in English, and I never read very much in German in computer science, I nonetheless spent 2.5 years on sabbaticals in Berlin and in Graz, Austria, because those are the places that my research area specialized. My research area had specialty units in. So I realize that you can't offer all languages, but as long as there seems to be demand and interest for it, I would hope that you would continue it. Different cultures, different languages express different cultures, and I would think there would be some who would find German more interesting and more appealing than the other languages that you have. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Scott. Mimi? I see Mimi in the Q&A, but I don't see you in the chat. There you are. Okay. Mimi? Thanks, Josh.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi. Do you see me too, or you just hear me?
We see a picture of you. It's a lovely picture.
A lovely picture. Okay. I am Mimi Lichtenstein, resident of Hanover. For those of you I don't know, I was on the board what feels like long ago. And if we had had Zoom meetings back then, who knows, I might still be on the board. Anyway, I'm here tonight because I wanted to give a big thank you to the school administration. As some people are aware, well, as everyone's aware, it's been a tough year to be a senior, graduating in high school or in college. And as we near graduation, there's been a lot of discussion and creativity and brainstorming about how best to celebrate our seniors, to send them off in a way that is safe and fun and inspiring for their future. And so I just want to say thank you for the school administrators, because they've been working with parents and on their own with teachers to make it so that the box day is going to be expanded and a little bit more celebratory, which is appreciated by all. And today I had a call with Jay and Liz, and we talked about some other ideas surrounding graduation that Jay is in support of, and I think that hopefully that will happen once we have conversations with the town and the emergency services folks. So I just wanted to give a shout out to them for being so collaborative and helpful, and that's it.
Thanks very much, Mimi.
Thanks, Mimi.
Thank you to everyone who's put a lot of effort into figuring out the high school graduation and also 8th grade. I mean, I know there's a lot of people who are trying to make this year as good as it can be for our kids. So thank you guys. Let's see, let's go to Penelope next, please.
Sorry, one second. She's using an older version of Zoom, so I will have to promote her to panelist for her to talk. One second.
Okay. Thanks, Josh. Huge shout out to Josh, too.
Okay, Penelope, can you hear us now? Are you able to talk?
Yes.
Can you
Okay.
hear me now? Okay. I would like to echo what Professor Drysdale said. I'm also here in favor of maintaining German 1 at Hanover High. I understand that another family has approached the German teacher to say they would be interested in having their children take German, which would have brought the German 1 number up to 15, which is a very strong number for a language class. And I hate to see German go because it's the only non-Romance language that we offer. And I think it gives a breadth to the program, and it allows students who might find German easier than a Romance language. It gives them an in into foreign language. We all know that it doesn't matter what language you learn, and I think as Hanover High has always had the reputation of having a very strong language program, and I think that by eliminating German 1, we're cutting the program off basically at the knees, and I think that would be very sad. And so I know the board has received letters, and so I would very much like you to reconsider this decision. I know the principals made it with great care. This is in no way against our principal, but I think it would be wonderful for the community if the board would reconsider that decision. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Penelope. I see Dina Romero would like to say something. Dina, hi.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
I'm not, this is a little different Zoom system that I used to. I'm a Hanover resident, a Hanover High graduate, and a former community counselor employed by the Dresden School District. And I'm want to just also echo what my former colleague Penelope said. Usually every year I come to the awards ceremony and I present the Emil Rube Photography Award. My father, Emil Rube, was German and came from Germany. And I think it's very important that people have an opportunity to learn this language. I know nothing about why the decision was made. I'm suspect it had to do with budget reasons, but I think languages are extremely important. And if there are people who are interested in taking German, I think it's something the school should offer. My experience has always been to see that when people want a particular sport at Hanover High School, somehow that always seems to be realized. And I think if there are people who want German, I think that is just as important, if not perhaps more. So that's my 2 cents worth. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you very much, Dina. I see, sorry, the name just went away again. Dean. Did you see that, Josh? Dean Madden, I think.
Working on it.
There we go.
Sometimes the list is not alphabetical. 1 second.
He's got his hand up, so he's at the
Yep,
top.
there we go. Got him now.
Thank you. Yeah, if you guys, members of the public, if you can put your hands up, that's helpful to Josh because he can grab you a little easier then. Thank you.
Hi, can you hear me now?
We can.
Yes, thank you for the opportunity. My name is Dean Madden. I'm also a Hanover resident, and I'm also here to ask the board to please reconsider, to the extent possible, the decision not to continue with German 1 this year. I echo all the comments that were made previously, and I wanted to flag a couple of additional points. I think the German program at Hanover has an unbelievable impact. 2 of my children went all the way through it and ended up, they're both about to finish their bachelor's degrees in Munich. There are many other families, I can think of at least 3 in the immediate vicinity of our children whose children also have gone to study in Germany for bachelor's degrees, which I think is a real, a fairly unusual outcome for language programs, but it does, particularly one as small as the German program. I think it underscores the importance of that. my understanding is that Hanover High School is one of only something like 18 or 20 public high schools in the United States that offer a German program up through the language qualifying exam for universities. So this is a real distinguishing feature for our school. And then perhaps most important to me is this idea of diversity in the language offerings that we make. I think it's extremely important. I took French all the way through high school myself. I'm a huge Francophile. But I think that we owe it to our students and our community to support a variety of languages to the extent possible. So if the numbers have now come into the range where funding would make sense, it would be great if the school could reconsider this decision. Thank you.
Thank you, Dean, and thank you to all of our public commenters for keeping it so succinct. I appreciate that. So I did just want to point out, and I sent out a letter to those who had written to the board chairs directly, just reiterating that this is not a board level decision. This is a decision that has been made at the school level, and I think people realize that. I understand, and I think we all understand that German is in a unique position because unlike French and Spanish, there is no pipeline for German. So I think we understand that it starts at German 1 at the high school. So there obviously are different enjeux, I can't think, stakes, that's the word, sorry, French teacher in my other life. There are different stakes for German 1 being canceled compared to, say, a French 1 or an Algebra 1 or anything else that might be canceled due to lower numbers. But given that this has been a building level decision, I did just want to give Justin a chance to respond briefly and just explain, I guess, sort of how this decision came about and what has been looked at. Justin, does that sound awesome?
Sure, thank you. So I'll try to stay brief. I could go on and on about this. I think, first of all, I would start by saying, you know, my decision not to offer German 1 has nothing to do with the quality of the language or the instruction or anything else. You know, I think I'm the fourth principal who's recommended ending the German program, and it has lingered on in our school. The staffing levels have increased and decreased with student enrollment over time. And, you know, I think quite honestly, German has been given special treatment in the language department to some degree, and really strong support. And so our languages have routinely run smaller classes than would happen in ordinary areas. You know, I hear every year when I look at the schedule, I hear about these people who exist out there who are going to take, and they're about to sign up for this English elective, or they're about to sign up for German. But our numbers were quite low this year for German 1 signups. And for those of you who've been around for a few years, many of the names are quite familiar on the list. You know, about 4 or 5 years ago, I also recommended that we think about ending the German program or not offering level 1 and reducing our German offerings. What's changed from that really in recent times, the pipeline has been strengthened for French and Spanish, and particularly Spanish. So on either side of the river, Norwich has offered French from kindergarten on up, and Spanish on the Ray School side, on the Hanover side of the river, has been offered kindergarten on up. Our biggest tuition town, Lyme, also only offers Spanish. So for those of you who've been here for a while, we had Maureen Doyle did a sabbatical. A lot of work has been done. Our language department has been looking at these changes in enrollment that we've seen coming as that kindergarten pipeline has come through. And we're really seeing this year, for the first time, we're seeing those impacts. And so Latin numbers are down, and our Latin teachers have reimagined the program. And our German numbers are down, and to some degree our French enrollment as well, with Lyme and Hanover really focusing there. So, you know, our German numbers in level 1 have fluctuated a bit. The highest they ever got was 12. I just want to be clear about that. So, I mean, that's kind of where we were. Typically, level to level in German, historically, we look at about an 80% retention rate. And so it's not all about the numbers, but as you think about a cohort of 12 students propagating through and losing 20% of those students each year, it really becomes untenably small pretty quickly. In level 4, for example, if you look at those higher levels that some people were mentioning, in level 4 this year, we have 2 students in German 4 and 2 students in 4 honors, and 0 students in any level 5. So that I agree. German's a valuable program. It's a wonderful part of our school and has been part of our tradition. But part of my job is thinking about how we allocate taxpayer resources. And in this case, I think there are other ways we can make German. We can have it continue to be part of our program. You know, we're having a board meeting in a unique means. There are ways our students can access German other than the traditional classroom situation, which we just year after year, we're seeing we, in my opinion, we do not have sufficient enrollment. So 12 out of the gate, when it's a singleton course, not all of those kids who request it, because it'll bump up against other things in the schedule. Of those 12 who've requested it, not all of them will end up there. And that cohort will propagate through over the next few years and get smaller, history tells us, by 20% per year.
Right, I muted myself. Thank you, Justin. So I see a couple of hands, one hand actually. I do want to move us forward into the main part of the meeting. Penelope, I'll let you just say one last thing and then I think we're going to move forward. But again, thank you everyone for expressing your support of the German program. And I did just want to say that, you know, we are embarking on a strategic plan, and we, as a board, we value the diversity and the variety of languages that we have in our program. And certainly we have talked about, in fact, strengthening and increasing that diversity going forward. And so as an option. And so I want to be clear that no one is intending for this to be the end of the German program in any way, shape, or form. It was a decision driven by numbers for this year. But I want to be very clear that the board has not decided we're done with German. That has never been part of our discussions. So Penelope, if you want to just say one last word.
Yes, two things. One is I forgot to say I'm a Norwich resident. I apologize. And then the other thing is I don't know how far back Justin is looking, but I have taught German 1 3 times at Hanover High. And one of those years there were 19 students in the class. So the German program hasn't always been underpopulated, and I think this year would have been 15 if the class had stayed in and the extra families would have been able to have their kids join. Then 15 seems like a reasonable number. It's a small number compared to maybe a social studies class for 9th graders, but for a language class, 15 would have been a solid number. That was all. Thank you.
Thank you, Penelope. All right. So I would like to go ahead and move into the regular meeting. Agenda review. I have one thing I need to add. So I would like to add to discussion a brief item on the Dresden Finance Committee. Tom's going to give us a quick update on that in business requiring discussion. So if we can make that maybe F. And then I'd actually like to move E in business requiring discussion up to the top and just start briefly with some suggestions for meeting structure changes to help move us along a little more quickly in our meetings. Is there anything else that people would like to add, amend, or move around? Okay, seeing none, we will move right along then. So 2020 March Intensive Report. So do I have Matt Prince and Julie Stevenson? I assume it just says Stevenson, unless you're just going by your last name these days, Julie.
I believe Matt Prince, Josh is going to make Matt Prince part of our group and he'll present.
I see his hand up. I'm here. I'm here. Matt, you're muted at this point, I think. There you go.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for having me tonight. I will keep this relatively brief. When March Intensive was created 13 years ago, it just required someone from the March Intensive Committee to come and present the courses in the fall, and then in the spring, just give a follow-up and report on how things went. Obviously, it's never a great thing when your program's on the front page of the Valley News, right, a week before it's supposed to start. COVID definitely created some problems to work through this year. We had trips to Poland, 2 to Spain, 1 to Colombia, a French exchange, a dog rescue trip to Puerto Rico. All of those got canceled in the last week. Additionally, courses at DHMC. We had other community service ones that were impacted in some particular way by COVID. So scrambling and getting those kids placed in existing courses or creating new courses for them, and dealing with the finances of obviously trying to collect money from travel companies and whatnot was a challenge, but we were able to work through it and come out on the other end. What's really good to report is that, in the survey of students this year, we actually enjoyed our highest numbers yet in terms of what students reported in terms of satisfaction with their courses. 93% of kids said that they would recommend their course to a friend. And that included, I was careful to check, kids who were enrolled in international trips who had then moved to alternative trips. I mean, I think students were understanding for sure. The biggest comment in terms of how they would improve March Intensive was actually to make it 5 days instead of 4. There's a bunch of other smaller ones about specific course ideas, but really it was a great year. And I think that people enjoyed the opportunities that they had. Since then I've seen one kid who was enrolled in the recycled eco-fashion class has gone on to propose an independent study in fashion design and actually continuing to make clothing for next year. We saw the group that was involved in quilting for disaster relief sort of get together online and make face masks and donate those when the need was so high. So that was neat to see that we sort of sparked kids' curiosity, and that I think that they seem to really enjoy the connections that they make with each other. The big challenge for us is moving forward is how to plan for next year in light of all of what's going on in the uncertainty. I think we're probably moving towards a policy for next year of obviously not having international trips proposed. There's the likelihood that they'd be able to go. And we may even extend that as far as just simply nothing that involves an airplane. But I think it's a little premature at this point to decide that. I think we'll see what the information is in the fall, but I think that that's probably a direction. That being the case, I think that one of the things that we'll try to focus on are increasing some of our outdoor classes. Obviously, easy to maintain social distance, at least with that. And as always, we're looking to expand service opportunities, because I think those in March Intensive tend to be particularly impactful. And so, we're going to be looking to try to partner with more organizations. Sort of a challenging time right now to be reaching out to people and saying, hey, would you like to work with a group of high school students or welcome them into your organization? So again, that's being paused a little bit, but we anticipate having a really strong program again next year. I think enthusiasm for March Intensive remains really high. I'll also say I usually get at least 1 or 2 recommendations from a school board member or someone who's in attendance at a school board meeting for a new course for next year. So if you yourself have a passion or talent that you want to share with our student community, or of someone who might be great, by all means, send me an email, matt.prince@hanovernorwichschools.org. But that's really what I've got for you for tonight. And I was just wanted to take any questions if any were there.
Thanks very much, Matt. Board members, any questions for Matt? Yeah.
Matt, I'm curious to know whether or not, did we have any financial impact to the scholarship fund as a result of any of the cancellations?
Well, I mean, like different courses had different levels of success in recapturing funds. And in some cases, some of the international trips got all but like $100 back per student. In that case, the scholarship fund was made whole again. In other cases, there were courses, because of policies with different airlines, that only were able to recapture about 50% of what was spent. And so the financial aid was not recovered, obviously, in that case. And truthfully, there's still a few outgoing claims that are out there and refunds that are being processed. So, the terms of where we stand financially, it's becoming clear. I mean, we'll roll over, I think, enough for next year, particularly if we're not having international trips. Those aren't our only hit in terms of what take scholarships, but they're certainly, they take big chunks of it. And so, I anticipate we'll still be able to meet, 100% of the requests that come in for next year.
A follow-up, if I may, Kelly?
Yeah.
So to the point that you made, there were some students or other participants in this reimbursed at different or varying amounts than others based on the trip then?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think everybody in the same trip got the same reimbursement, right? But in some cases, people had booked with, you know, international airlines that had different policies in terms of what they were able to provide a refund to. So yes, I mean, I think that in some trips, some families were reimbursed almost 100% of what they put into it, and in other cases, it was a smaller percentage. But it was everybody within a particular course, you know, received the same amount.
Can I pass it over to Jamie and then Jay, because I see their hands up, and I suspect they're going to answer some of this. Jamie, if you want to go first.
Sure. So April and I, she's the financial services manager in the finance office, April Baraka, and I took a quick look at the numbers, although there's a few stragglers that are still being worked through. For the most part, I believe almost all of the trips gained back at least 80, if not 90% of the expenditures. Some of the airlines were much quicker to refund and better to work with. Although one of the airlines that didn't want to do a refund in cash did offer vouchers to some of the family members. We did look at the costs or lost costs to the MI program, and you know what we needed to cover, because at the point in time that the travel was canceled, you know, we just said to those poor folks that were impacted, you know, we'll cover you, do an alternative trip, and we'll look at it in the end to see where we all come out, right? So actually, I think the whole entire financial impact for all of the changes was about $3,000. So the bulk, and we covered that. So the bulk of the rollover that they would normally have should be intact.
Thanks, Jamie. Jay?
I just want to take the opportunity to thank Matt and also Jamie and her staff, because the last actual face-to-face meeting I think that we held in my office was just this decision. And there was a lot of second guessing. We had a lot of very upset, understandably upset parents. But in hindsight, it was the right decision. And Matt was there debate about whether to go to Colombia or not, whether Puerto Rico was okay. And Matt, like, that was I know that was a really difficult series of decisions to make. And then after that, I feel like Matt went over and above contacting these different, not just airlines, but like some Airbnb in Colombia, for example, trying to figure out a way to try to recoup something. You really did a lot. And I just wanted to thank you personally.
Thank you.
Likewise. Yep. And thank you, as always, thank you to the whole staff who, you know, scrambled to create new opportunities for all these kids and make sure that it sounds like a very successful March Intensive. So thank you guys.
Quick follow-up.
Yep.
I would just say to Neil's question, if anybody has any questions on the reimbursements, you know, please feel free to reach out to myself or April Baraka, and we can follow up on that. I know we cut a lot of checks, so if anybody feels like maybe something didn't seem proper or correct, give us a ring, okay, or reach out.
Thanks, Jamie. All right, so reluctantly, I'm going to move on to B, which is our farewell to the HHS Council representative. I'm sure we're going to get a wonderful replacement, but Noah, you have done a phenomenal job. It was not uncommon for me to get an email from Noah requesting, council participation in something before it had even been really fully disseminated or established. I mean, Noah is on top of this, and he has done a phenomenal job with all of the COVID-19 changes through the principal search, the associate principal search. You've really done a wonderful job, Noah, keeping us abreast of where the students are at and what council is talking about, and we've really, really appreciated your participation this year. So thank you so much from all of us. And I know Noah is going to, yes, yay. I know Noah is going to be introducing, it looks like Casey McGuire, and perhaps some of the other council members as well.
So first of all, I want to thank the Dresden School Board for giving me the opportunity to work with a group of very dedicated people. I have a true appreciation for your stamina after attending some of these late night meetings, but it's been worth staying up late because I've been able to see the workings of the school board and how it supports the education of my peers. And from all of council, we genuinely appreciate that this board has sought out and welcomed student voices. During the discussions surrounding the school resource officer and grading during the pandemic, council has been truly heartened that this board has solicited our opinions. And so I am proud to announce that Casey McGuire will be continuing the tradition of sharing council's voice as the new council representative for 2020 through 2021. I'll let Casey introduce the rest of council's new leadership and give our council report.
Thank you, Noah. Hi, everyone. I'm Casey McGuire, and I'm going to be a senior next year. So in terms of introducing the rest of the leadership, next year, Sage McGinley-Smith will be the moderator of council. Noah Phipps will be the assistant moderator. Riley Uterwick will be the treasurer. Ellie Stannard is the secretary. I'm the Dresden School Board representative. Ben Wagner will be the public relations officer, and Julia Cook will be the CPP representative.
Awesome. Thank you, Casey. And I see many of them in attendance here, so thank you, all of you, for tuning in tonight, too.
And then also for my council report, we elected a new group of council members for the 2020-2021 school year, which was really great because we wanted to make sure we were able to get enough votes during this time, especially doing elections online. We also elected Kate McCall as the second student representative on the Hanover High School Scheduling Committee. And so this committee is currently in the process of considering schedules brought by each of the faculty departments, and also schedule brought by students and council together that really reflects student perspectives on scheduling. We also elected Sage McGinley-Smith and Alex Rockmore to the principal hiring committee. And in terms of motions, no major motions were passed or brought. However, there was a bylaw revision that was brought just to make changes to reflect many of our current practices on council, and an allocation for student life committee that was passed on May 6th. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Casey. And congratulations to all of the council members for their new appointments. Are there any board member questions for Casey or Noah? Seeing none. Well, thank you guys again. And Noah, we'll miss seeing you on these in the Brady Bunch here, but we know you'll be tuning in. All right, moving along to the principal's reports.
I'll jump in if that's all right.
Justin's going to kick it off. All right.
So recently we did the first part of our remote learning graduation was to pass out caps and gowns and record short video clips with each senior, which Jess Eakin, our librarian, will be editing together into a graduation ceremony along with all the typical performers and speakers. And then on the 11th of June, all seniors and their families will come back through, same process, it'll be scheduled, and there'll kind of be a procession through our back, through the Hubby Gate, through the back parking lot, and each senior will receive a box of items. We're not going through everything that's in there, but a number of personal items, including yearbooks and whatnot, but also, you know, really our staff has gone above and beyond, as Mimi alluded to, really doing our best to make this a personal ceremony for each kid and really recognizing what they've done over this past throughout their educational career. So thank you to all of our staff. Liz Murray, John Gentine are our class advisors. So thank you to them and everyone who's been involved. It's been a tremendous effort. And the families have been wonderful. We had lots of families all dressed up come through. We had one senior arrive on horseback. We had pets who were, in addition to the horse, we had we had pets who were part of the video. So it was really wonderful. And Mother Nature helped us out with the, last week was probably the most gorgeous week of weather we've had since last fall. And then at our staff meeting today, just one last thing, I'll keep it brief. We heard a presentation looking at from some of our mental health staff in the counseling department, looking at ideas they have about how to make our Common Ground program a more focused advisory program with some more individual staff working with even smaller than our Common Ground groups, smaller groups of students, and building that direct connection. So more to come on that in the future.
Awesome. Thanks, Justin. I'm going to go ahead and move on to Tim right now, and then I'll take board questions for both principals maybe, and one after that.
Hey, good evening, everybody. We have not had nearly as much going on this spring as we normally would. We did, however, manage to put on our spring talent show on the nights of May 8th and 9th through yeoman's work from our technical staff and some creative thinking to get around the algorithms that YouTube has put in there to avoid the use of some music. But it was well received by everybody, and the talent, as usual, was pretty incredible. We've also been doing our transitional meetings via Zoom. So we have had, I was part of a 5th grade homeroom chat this morning for 5th graders at the Ray School who'll be transitioning to 6th grade. So we're trying to make that happen remotely. We've had meetings with 6th graders at the Marion Cross School, 5th grade parents, and we've been doing bi-weekly parent meetings, which are probably over for now, just to talk about what we've been doing remote learning and try to continue to adapt that as we go forward. And we are too also trying to think of ways that we can honor our 8th graders in a way that makes sense, but is also safe and stays within lines of what the community, the health officers in the community want. So we're in the process of finalizing those things, as obviously everything is sort of shifting at the moment. But we've gotten a lot of feedback from our 8th graders and their parents and everyone else. So hopefully we'll have something out there that can honor what they've been to the Richmond community in the time that they've been here. And that's about it. I think we are looking forward to the end of the year and hopefully planning for whatever next year will bring. But that's where we are.
Great. Thank you, Tim. So board member questions for Tim and Justin.
I neglected to say that part of our talent show was, Tom reminded me, was raising money for the Haven. And the talent show did raise over $6,000 for the Haven this year. So that was something that was all student driven. The student council thought that we should do something with our talent show to help the community, and that's what they chose. It was pretty heartening.
It was incredibly impressive. I loved watching the style of it, the way they kept updating, like the old school telethons that, you'd see they should have had a big board behind them with the numbers updating, but no, it was wonderful. Thanks, Tim. Dan.
Justin, Tim, this is for both of you. 2 things. One is Justin at least brought up mental health stuff. Any sense of how kids are doing generally? I'd love to hear that from both of you, and if people are availing themselves of the resources that are there. So I'd just like to hear about that. The other thing comes from conversations that we've had with our newly reinstantiated education committee, and questions about teachers creating sort of end of year summary documents, which could then serve as review documents for the fall. A kind of whatever, document a treasury of learning, so that kids know what they learned, and then next year can look at that as the year starts. Anyway, comment, and you won't be surprised to hear that I think it's especially important in the math classes this year, as we're finishing up early. I'm sure there is stuff that is missed in every class. Of course, there's stuff that missed by not being in class and having ready access to teachers, but in those classes which really have a dependence from one year to another, it's felt even more keenly. So thanks for taking those on in whatever order you want.
Thanks. Justin, you want to go first again?
Sure, I'll jump in. I would say, Dan, we will be we'll be sending out a form for feedback to cover a wide range of areas. But certainly anecdotally, I can say, and dealing directly with our counselors, yes, people are reaching out to their counselors, to our mental health clinicians, our school psychologist. Families are reaching out, students are reaching out. Students are reaching out with concerns about others. You know, I would say our normal processes continue to happen in this new environment. And I would say all of us, staff, students, adults, kids, all of us are struggling to some degree is my kind of anecdotal feedback. And I think also it will be a chunk of our more formal feedback processes to hear about how things went as we think about planning for next year. You hit the nail on the head. I would say our courses that are most sequential are the ones that we're concerned, maybe is the wrong word, but that will be the most different next year as you think about that course sequence. And this year was, it was what it is. It's dramatically different than normal. And so we have a lot of preparation to do for next year. So that's we're going to be talking later today about that June 5th timeline, but we're spending a lot of time with our staff thinking about, obviously work will happen throughout the summer, but that window from June 5th to the 22nd, when we have all of us and we have time to really do some deep diving. So we're doing a lot to structure our time and think about it. The math department is a great example, but really everywhere. I mean, you look at students' writing progression, and it'd be a little harder to make sense of as compared to the math sequence, but no less concerning that students have done things differently and have done less of certain things and less literature analysis, and so we're in a different spot next year. So a lot of attention. I think if the education committee was willing to, I'm sure we'd have many staff members who'd be willing to come present as we're doing this planning and talk about the sorts of things that we're doing and get your feedback and talk about any and all aspects of what we're up to.
Well, you just offered, and I can tell you that the four of us plus Jay actually would like that. So you're on the hook now. We're whatever. We would actually like to hear some kind of a presentation from each of the departments. I think that's safe to say. Kelly, would you agree?
Yeah, particularly I think after you've had those 2 weeks to kind of reflect and figure what you can figure in 2 weeks.
Right.
Happy to follow up at any point.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Thank you.
Tim, you want to jump in? Thanks, Justin.
Yeah, I would echo what Justin said in terms of the mental health. I think it's varied and it differs week to week and day to day, especially with middle school students, where some days everything seems fine and some days everything is difficult. And their parents as well. What we have been doing is trying to reach out on a really regular basis and making sure that all of the students have some sort of contact with some sort of an adult in the building, technically in the building, at some point during the week. So we've had very few students who have gone sort of radio silent. We did have a sort of a huge plus last week, and we had 2 students who had been through no fault of their own, basically been dealing with issues inside their own home and had some difficulty making some of their classes make it to one of their English classes. And all the English teachers were thrilled and thought it was so great that they actually got to see them. So we really are keeping track of everyone and reaching out to them probably after 2 or 3 days if we don't hear from them, making sure that everybody's okay. The counselors and a lot of our ed assistants, to be perfectly honest, have done incredible work in making sure that they stay connected to the students. I think it's a difficult time, and it's going to be difficult to sort of transition into whatever we do over the summer and whatever we do in the fall, but we're just going to keep plugging away. In terms of the academic part of it, I think we are really going to use the 2 weeks on the schedule to evaluate what we have done and what was missed. I know that the math department is already talking to each other about where people are and what they'll need to cover next year in order to catch people up and sort of where it is. And I know that Carla, who teaches our algebra and geometry classes for the 8th graders, is in contact with people at the high school about the same thing, just to make sure that we know what we have covered and what's been missed. And then we'll just have to do a lot of evaluation over the summer, because a great deal of this is going to be contingent upon how much is lost over the summer or how long it takes some of our middle school students to sort of get back up to speed in school and figure out exactly what it is they need to do. Strangely enough, as I'm sure everybody has seen, that some students who do really, really, really well in the regular classroom are struggling a little bit. And some students who struggle in the regular classroom are just absolutely crushing it remotely. So we're definitely just having to keep an open mind as to where people are and follow the idea of, well, we're just going to have to deal with the students where they are and figure out how to get them to where they need to be. We are looking at a number of different assessment tools that we can figure that out, just because you don't have that day-to-day interaction with students that we usually have, that we base a lot of what we're doing on. So
yeah. I mean, if I could just say one follow-up thing, Kelly, and then I'll be quiet. I mean, that's for what it's worth. I mean, I actually feel like creating this kind of capstone document for the classes is useful for everyone involved. It's useful for the teachers, I think, as a check mark to see where we actually got to, what we covered thoroughly, what we only touched on, what we didn't quite hit. And then the classes that have to sync up with that will then be able to see that document and see that that's where they are. And then the students will also have that kind of document to memorialize, if you like, what they learned, but also to look at as they start the year. I'm not naive enough to think that students are going to be revisiting that for 12 weeks of summer. But that said, to have it, to have access to it digitally in some repository where all the classes can be listed, I think would actually serve everyone in the process, again, of aligning things moving forward and also giving the students something to look at as they come back to school in the fall. So thanks, Kelly.
Thanks, Dan. Neil?
Kelly, more of just an essential a process question. You don't need to answer it tonight, but I want to make sure that I understand the mechanism by which committee work is done for the board. Are the committees in charge of determining the things that they want to look at, or is it at the direction of the board? And when we engage in these types of discussions, how to interpret, was Dan's recent comment really just a comment? Was it a request for the administration to actually do something?
Mm-hmm.
And if it was, then what's the mechanism by which we're vetting these things to make sure that we're doing it appropriately?
Mm-hmm. I think that's a fair question. And I think, I guess as a sort of non-answer answer, I would say, it's a newly formed committee. And I think one of the primary things that we should be determining is just that, right? What's coming out of that committee? What's the flow, I guess, from committee discussion to board through the superintendent and back, right? where are those lines and expectations and action items demarcated and started and finished. And so I think it's a very good point. That's, as I said, a non-answer, but but thank you for the comment. And I think, just to clarify, to the extent that he's clarifying, I do think Dan's question was Dan asking, not necessarily the committee asking. I know he made the comment about the committee would like to see, to hear from people, but I do think that was more of a personal board member comment, was my understanding. So.
If you want me to clarify, I asked the question as a concerned parent and as a board member. Justin then offered up the idea that the departments would come and speak to the committee. Hence, as the committee chair, I answered that and said that would be great. Thank you, Kelly.
All right. Okay, any other questions for Tim or Justin? So moving right along to items for discussion, and the first item for discussion is actually related to the fact that while we see times on our agenda, we are already quite a bit over the times that were indicated for the start of the meeting. And you know, that's not unexpected when we have an engaged public, which we have on our Zoom meetings, which is great. But as we move into the business requiring discussion, I wanted to just briefly mention some of the suggestions that came out of the NHSBA board chair training. And I think that can be shared, John and Rick, you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that can be shared with the entire board. And we actually thought there were some really valuable takeaways from that board training. So I think we can share the slides that came out of that. So to the extent that we can, I think it might be worthwhile to just share it out with everyone. But some of the key takeaways from that, first off, was as we go into discussion, and what I've noticed in our meetings is that we often have discussion before our business requiring action. That's just traditionally how we've structured our meetings. But it tends to mean that we feel like we have all this time during discussion. And so we go on for a while in discussion, and then we get to the action and it's already quite late. And so one of the suggestions that they had was in your discussion items to keep an actionable motion in mind. And I'm hoping that might help keep us sort of out of the weeds, I guess, and stay within the business that is really the business of the board, if that makes sense. So that was one thing I wanted to just mention, very high level. The other thing was to welcome public comment, obviously, but to keep in mind that this is not intended to be a back and forth conversation with the public. It is intended to be a forum for the board to deliberate and make decisions. And so while public input is certainly valuable, we need to be mindful of avoiding sort of a back and forth conversation with the public in this forum. And there may very well be in the future a need for a more public interaction forum with some of the things that we are facing. And so we'll that there may be a time for that later on this summer. The third thing I want to mention that came up was the notion of abstention when you have a conflict of interest. And they were very clear, not to open that whole can of worms again, but they were very clear that when you have a conflict of interest, as defined in our policies, you should recuse yourself, not abstain from a vote, but recuse yourself entirely from the conversation, the vote, that you should simply not be participating in that. So that was a very clear indication. And I'm happy to have conversations with people offline if you have questions about that, or to share that presentation with you. But Barrett Christina with the NHSBA was very, very clear about that point. And then the final point that I'm hoping we'll be able to maybe even use tonight, I know Rick's planning to use it in the Hanover meetings, is the notion of a consent agenda, particularly when we have to do a roll call vote to do every single motion separately, and a roll call vote for all 12 of us is very long, as we know. So a consent agenda would just be the principle that we move to accept all of these items as presented. And then if we need to pull any out, we can do that. But especially as we look at all of the positions, for example, that we'll be asked to approve tonight, it might very well make sense to do a consent agenda since we will have already discussed them in non-public. So those were the points that I wanted to make on coming out of the NHSBA training. Questions, Ben? I saw your hand. Did you have a question?
Yeah, I had a brief question, Kelly. Thank you. Did they have a specific definition of conflict of interest?
And it didn't differ from what we've talked about.
Okay.
In general, it's a pecuniary interest would be the main definition. So a monetary interest. But they did essentially say to be honest with yourself, whether, if you feel that you are conflicted, then you should recuse yourself from that. And the line being, if it's a direct pecuniary interest, that's a sort of a no-brainer, if you will.
Okay. Is it self-proclaimed only?
They didn't specify that. My sense is in terms of pecuniary, that would be a pretty clear cut line. If it's in terms of calling someone else out, I suppose that's always your right to do that as a board member, but they didn't address that specifically.
Okay, thanks.
Yep. Other questions? Okie dokie. Yeah, oh, sorry, Rick. You're in the corner of my screen, so you're hard to see. I apologize.
Kim's pointing to me. No, I just wanted to mention too, one of the other tools that they said we probably should use more often is a motion to end discussion. Mm-hmm. So if people feel like we're bogging down, just someone make a motion, second it, and then we can vote whether we're going to move on in the agenda, which I'm going to try to do more often in the Hanover meetings.
Excellent. Thanks, Rick. All right. Any other questions on that? All right. Then I'll move to end discussion on that one. See you, Rick. There you go. Oh, John's seconding. Okay. So moving on, Jay, I think you have an update for us on the end of regular instruction.
Sure, Kelly, if you refresh, if everybody refreshes, I did add, you asked me to add a report from the Hanover Finance Committee. I put that in there, so I can certainly talk about the June 5th date first, if you'd rather.
Was that Kim maybe who did that? No? No.
You mean Dresden Finance?
Dresden, I'm sorry.
Dresden. Update. Not Hanover.
I think I typed it in there properly. I just said it wrong.
Correct.
There we go. It's the Dresden Finance Committee.
Pull that up now. I'm sorry. Okay. So Dresden Finance Committee, that is actually an update from Tom, and I think it's just a brief update about where things stand on a potential Dresden Finance Committee. Correct, Tom? If you want to talk to that.
Sorry, do you want me to talk about that now?
I guess yes.
Sure. So it's probably more appropriate to call it the Norwich Finance Committee, which would then join with the Hanover Finance Committee to form a Dresden Finance Committee, which we've not had for as long as I can remember now. But spurred on by a visit from Kari and Carrie last late summer, fall, to encourage us to relook at the process of building a Norwich Finance Committee again, so that we could have input on the Dresden budget for future years. So they have provided input, but it's been from just the representation of Hanover members, obviously. A couple of years ago, the Norwich Select Board had decided to back out of an MOU that we had with the school board had with them to form a finance committee because there hadn't been a lot of interest. They felt by just asking constituents to look at the town budget, it might seem less onerous. They were able to recruit 5 members, and they have been working on the Norwich Finance Committee, I think for 1, maybe 2 years now in reviewing the budget. But given this interest and allowing those members to see what the workload looked like, I think that it was amenable, the select board is amenable to looking at the possibility of expanding their charge. So I've been working with the Norwich select board member, John Langus, on an MOU and a charge revised slightly from what had previously been developed by Neil and Carrie Callahan when Carrie was on the Norwich board. We think we're getting close to that. John is going to present it at the select board meeting tomorrow night, I believe. And then I was going to bring it before the Norwich School Board on Wednesday of next week. for approval, or at least the first review of the MOU, with the hope of soon reconstituting Finance Committee after that, assuming that the Norwich Finance Committee membership can meet with Norwich School Board members and get appointed by both boards. What I was planning to do tonight is not actually hand out the MOU, but I will send it after the meeting tonight so that any Hanover board members can provide any input, questions, concerns on the MOU in charge as it's currently drafted with John and my comments on it. And I'll raise those at the Norwich School Board meeting next week for our consideration as well. And I don't mean to put him on the spot, but Garrett was a member of the Norwich Finance Committee last year. So I don't know, Garrett, if you wanted to chime in on anything there. Don't feel like you need to, but.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, it was very much in its infancy as far as what we were doing. So it was a lot of policy work and a little bit on the budget. And I think it's, a work in progress with regards to the Finance Committee and what its role is, obviously with the select board members, a couple of them changing over this year. I think there was a definite interest, though, to, help out and put two and two together with regards to trying to improve the communication between the town and the school board so that everyone was on the same page and knew what the budget was going to look like, which obviously is pretty much 50% school board stuff and our school and 50% town. So.
Great, thanks, Garrett. Sorry to put you on the spot there. So as I said, this will come before the Norwich School Board next week. I'll send everybody the draft document tonight or tomorrow morning, and feel free to provide any comments or questions or concerns between now and next Wednesday night.
Awesome, thank you, Tom. And just in terms of board representation, you would probably be looking for one member from the Norwich committee. And it sounds like it would be a while before we would get to the point where we would need some sort of joint representation for a Dresden Finance Committee. Is that correct?
That's my feeling. Yeah, we would appoint, much like Kim sits on as a liaison on the Hanover Finance Committee, a Norwich member for the Norwich Finance Committee. And one more thing I'll add too, sorry, is that as part of the charge, we are looking at a 5-member Norwich Finance Committee that would join those members already on the Hanover Finance Committee.
All right, super. Thank you, Tom. Any other questions for Tom at this point? All right, super. And I muted myself. Jay, if you want to go ahead and talk to us about the end of school.
Sure. I just want to share that planning, we've been working with the leadership team to work on planning for what happens after June 5th. But I feel it important to inform the board that when we met as the SAU 70 board, I presented to the board the option to have an early ending to regular instruction. When I did that, I based the request for a waiver on an hours calculation that we did at the SAU office. And as it turns out, that calculation was in error. And we are fine in terms of the hours required at the high school. We're a little bit short at the middle and elementary school. Had the waiver gone through, we would have been granted the blessing of the state to go ahead and have less than the 990 hours and the 945 hours at those two schools. But because we reported that we had more than enough hours, they didn't forward the waiver request that I sent to the DOE. This error was brought to my attention by one parent who happened to catch it. I'm glad that he did. It certainly wasn't an intentional mistake on our part. The remedy is the question. According to the state, there really is little consequence, and those waivers were granted to districts that ended as early as May 15th. But I feel that I need to make a correction publicly, which I'll do in an update tomorrow, because I made the grave mistake of providing too much information, I think, in working through that process. But the remedy would be to at least make something available for folks. And I'm working with both Tim and Lauren to have something available for parents who'd like to take advantage of it. And that's what the law requires us to do, is to make some instruction available. And that'll suffice for the DOE's purposes. I just wanted to apologize to the board. You should be able to rely on me for accurate information, and I goofed this time. I stand by the June 5th date as probably not enough time to work with our staff, given the nature of the planning we have to do. I just wish that it had been cleaner. And so I wanted to offer that apology. That said, we're not waiting till June 5th to plan. Our administrative staff has been actively working on developing 3 different plans: a plan for remote instruction if we were to open schools with remote instruction, a plan for a fully restored normal school day, such as it might be, and then one for some sort of a hybrid. And the teams have been doing a great job. Both the Ray School and Marion Cross have been working together on their end, and the high school and middle school have been working together. And today we had another meeting where they started to put those plans together. So we will have at least a high-level version of all 3 plans that will then be vetted with Jamie to take a look at what the implications will be for all of those things. If we end up with some sort of a hybrid learning model, guidance that continues to emerge from the state, from the federal government, will dictate that there's going to be some measures we'll have to take that will cost money. So when we think about things like small class sizes, having 8 kids in a classroom, or having shifts, there's always a follow-up question. So yes, if we do that, then what happens to transportation? All these things are still being hammered out. The task force that the New Hampshire DOE has employed is supposed to have its recommendations done by June 30th. I really highly doubt that they'll give us concrete guidance. They will probably give us suggestions, and there'll be many decisions we'll need to make together. But we will not be able to certainly can't make them tonight with the information that we have. So, I guess in a nutshell, planning is proceeding. I'm encouraged by the depth and quality of that planning, and it's planning that's being done in the absence of clear guidelines around some of the most important questions that we have. So that's where we are. June 5th, I think, aside from the parent who contacted me about the calculation of the days, I have had nothing negative. I've received no negative report from any family wishing to continue remote learning beyond June 5th. I think we have an absolute commitment to making sure that we're providing other ways for students to stay engaged over the summer, and to incorporate the possibility of summer programming in that planning. So those are the things that we are absolutely including in this effort.
Thanks very much, Jay. And I will just speak for myself when I say, while I always appreciate your honesty and your willingness to take responsibility, I think we all understand that you have been working 8 days a week. So thank you for everything that you're doing. Any other questions for Jay on that matter? All right, super. Thank you again. Moving on to the potentially very meaty discussion about summer camp and summer school. We have a lot of documents available on board docs for public and board. And I would just point out again that this is something that has a motion associated with it. So as we're asking questions and thinking this through, please think about, think about the discussion in terms of the motion that we're being asked to consider, which is at the bottom of our business requiring action. So with that said, Jay, if you want to tee this up.
I can tee it up. The documents that you have are somewhat self-explanatory. We've been approached by Town of Hanover, and they have followed up with another email as guidance around the precautions that will be necessary to operate summer programming. Have continued to come out of Concord. It's becoming more and more of an issue, and we are facing the very real possibility of having some sort of programming over the summer, and we've been asked to use multiple buildings. And so this is something we need to discuss and decide if we're willing to do that. we've had some conversations. I think I can't remember which meeting it was in now, but when we first talked about this, the idea was, at least as best I remember it, that we thought it'd be better for us to limit that sort of programming to a single building rather than having two buildings as were requested involved with that sort of programming. But this is where we need to deliberate because they need an answer in order for them to move forward. Jamie, did you want to add anything? You've been in conversation with the folks too.
We've had multiple discussions at the leadership level, and I know that probably all of your administrators want to speak to this tonight. I think we should probably allow John Sherman, who's on the line, to speak to it as well, because they did reach out to us on May 7th. It was discussed at the Hanover School District meeting, and because the request spans both districts, Hanover School District and Dresden School District, in that they were looking at Ray School and Richmond Middle School. That's why it's also on your agenda here. And I can answer specific questions, but I know people want to speak to it.
Before we go to that, I'm sorry, just one document question as everyone's kind of listening and looking at all this. The health guidance for childcare after school, that's a Vermont document. Is that based on national guidelines or is that Vermont specific? Just so we know what we're looking at.
It's probably Vermont specific, but I wanted to post everything that had been sent in. The one that New Hampshire is going by is the one field guide for camps. I think it's 82 pages. I think that's the most recent. And I know that John and his team have been going through this document and trying to make proper arrangements for what they can and cannot accommodate.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Josh, do we have John on here? Don't know that I see him in our attendee.
He was. It should say Hanover Parks and Recreation.
Ah, okay, there we go. Different John.
Hanover Parks and,
John
Hanover
Feldy
Parks
was
and
just this. So I think we need to, there we go. John, are you there?
Yep, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Thank you so much. Yes.
Yeah, very good. Thank you for having me here tonight, and look forward to having a discussion with everybody on this. Nicole is here with me as well, so if you guys have any questions, we can definitely answer all of them for you. It doesn't look like my video's working, but we'll just go with audio. So on May 5th, the state of New Hampshire came out with some draft guidelines. They have not finalized that yet, so we don't even have any finalized guidelines yet. But the American Camp Association has come out with national guidelines for both overnight and day camps, and that's the 82-page report that we're definitely been digesting, going through.
Just want to interrupt for 1 second. I can give you video access, but I'll need to rejoin you as a panelist. Would video be helpful?
No, I was just expecting that, so it kind of threw me off at the beginning. Yeah.
Okay, sorry about that. Thanks.
Yeah, not a problem. So we are digesting that right now. The good news is that everything that came out in that 82 pages of guidelines was stuff that we had thought of already and working towards, so there was no curveballs thrown at us. But the biggest thing is what they are terming pods. And you guys are probably falling into the same type of guidelines when you're looking at, school for the fall. So they want to have pods of up to 8 to 9 kids per classroom, with up to 1 or 2 camp counselors with them. So what that means is we're obviously going to need more space, because normally we have about 20 kids in each classroom. So what our request is tonight is, at the Ray School, we don't need any additional space. What we requested will work. But at the Richmond Middle School, we usually have 1 classroom. And to pull off summer camp, we're actually going to need a total of 4, so 3 additional classrooms. And that would allow us to give that separation, which is key in the
guidelines, because we're going to have camps at Ray School, Richmond Middle School, and we'll also have camps at Tenney Park as well. So we can really have some good separation of both campers and staff. And with that, definitely open to any questions anyone may have.
I want to give our administrators a chance to sort of speak. I know Jamie had said that they had wanted to discuss this. I see Nissa and Tim probably most, especially with this conversation. I don't know if you guys had anything you wanted to say at this point before we take questions. No? Okay. Jay, did you want to add anything? Oh, Tim, sorry. Yep, Tim, go ahead.
I just think that from speaking from administrators, sort of in an interesting situation in terms of being caretakers of the buildings over the summer, and understanding that we really do want to do what we can to sort of help the town through this difficult time. But I think all of us are sort of trying to juggle the fact that our own students who are under IEPs, who may need extended time in the summer to fulfill their educational requirements, are currently being told that they should do that remotely, coming out of the DOE because of safety issues. And then to open up to close the buildings for students for an educational situation, and then open the buildings for students in a camp situation seems like a sort of a difficult dilemma for all of us to sort of juggle our way through. So I think that's the crux of what the administrators are dealing with. I think basically in all of the buildings, to be able to say some people can come in, but some people can't, seems like an odd situation to be in. I don't mean to speak for anybody else, but that's sort of the feeling that I'm getting from our meetings.
Thanks. Does anyone else want to speak to this? Jay, go ahead.
I would just add to what John said, like the guidance isn't final yet. It's the final draft, I think, is what they're coming out with, and they're wrestling with this same issue in Vermont. And I hate to chalk this up to another one of these unanswered questions, but we are way past the point of frustration, and I can't fault our leaders because they're still reacting to what's happening with the disease. I mean, there's a very different sort of trajectory of the disease in Vermont than there is in New Hampshire right now. And we're still all sort of on pins and needles waiting to see what's going to happen with another peak or sort of resurgence of the disease if we're too quick to return to some approximation of normal. And there's just a real reticence. And I think that's where we are. We know how important the Hanover Parks and Recreation programs are for our families. And even if we follow these guidelines, I'm guessing that there's going to be a significantly reduced number of students we can serve. Maybe John can speak to that a little bit so we have a better sense for how many kids we're talking about. But, and for John's benefit as well, in our previous conversation at the Hanover meeting, we were concerned that if we were to open up both sites, that we then have double the disinfecting and cleaning regimen, and essentially double our potential exposure if there is any disease that finds its way into our building. So that's kind of why we're on the fence. And I agree with Tim. It's like we know how important the programs are. We want to help to the degree we can. There are just a lot of unanswered questions for us right now.
John, before
I don't think
you
I helped.
answer that. Okay. No, I mean, it's not an easy thing. I just wanted to add, I've heard from, I would say, many sets of parents that whatever increased cost there is, we will pay the increased cost. We will, if there's more cleaning costs, we'll pay the cleaning costs. I think there is a, I don't want to say desperation, but a real need from some parents for this childcare this summer. So I did just want to, I said I would share that information. And, you know, the other thing that I just wanted to ask, I guess to throw out there as something for us to think about is, you know, if we're making this decision to open for camps, if the full year school students, if that decision could then be revised, if we're going to be opening up the buildings anyway, if we might want to consider revising that decision, and if that is a possibility. I don't know if it is. So I apologize if I'm speaking out of turn in that sense, because those decisions may have already been made and been finalized, but I did just want to, I guess, wonder out loud if it is if it has to be an inconsistent communication to those students, or if we could revisit that decision. So I see a couple of board member questions. So John, before I give you a chance to speak again, I wanted to take those questions because I think it might help to have all the questions at the same time. So Rick, if you want to ask your question.
Yeah, so this is Rick Johnson. So I know in the past you said that we've had camps at both the middle school and the elementary school. And is there a reason why we cannot consolidate the older kids and the younger kids into either the high school or one of the, probably the Richmond school, a little larger, so we're not having two facilities impacted?
I'm not sure Richmond School is larger. I could be wrong on that. I think it may actually be smaller, but so that was Rick's question. Dan, do you have a question to add on to that so we can kind of gather all the questions and then maybe have someone speak to them?
I just wanted to know what's going to be the process for putting, so assuming that we make use of the buildings, we will in some way, what's going to be the process of putting policy in place around like contact tracing and closing and stuff like that? I assume this isn't the last time we're going to talk about it, so.
Okay, thanks, Dan. And Ben, did you want to add another question to that list? And then I'll.
Yeah, sort of a general theme of, so how is there going to be enforcement of like kids playing together? You know, if tag starts, does that mean discipline is coming to stop the tag? If it's at the race school, what do we do about playground safety? How does the bathroom situation work when there's going to be regular kids with very dirty hands in there all the time? And the last point was noting that several of the child cares for the pre-K sector are opening up June 15th. And so whether it's babies are going to daycare, but older kids are not, and then that just might mess up families even further and that kind of stuff. And I also know, looking at the calendar, it looks like CAST would not actually start until June 29th. Is that correct? And then that's the case, you know, there's still a whole nother month and change before this actually happens for planning. Yeah, for summer, for planning things. Right. Thanks.
Mm-hmm. All right. So John, if you want to, John, Jay, I'm not sure who should kick it off, but if you guys want to kind of address some of those questions.
I'll address the consolidation to one school.
Okay, Jamie, go for it.
Go ahead, John. I think that was the original discussion at the Hanover School District. It's also a discussion we did carry into the leadership team. So I don't think it's a problem to consolidate to one building, and I think that would probably be my preference.
Okay. John, did you want to respond to some of that?
Yes. So with the model that we're planning on following for summer camp, we're going with what we term pods. So like I said, that would be 8 to 9 kids per pod. And each pod is not going to intermingle with any other pods during the summer. So when you're out in a field or you're out moving around, it's going to be that one single pod. Because what's very important with this is making sure that if somebody does get sick, as somebody mentioned with the contact tracing, if you're keeping your pods separate, then you don't have to worry about the whole camp being infected and who else might have been infected if we do have an issue. So the idea of the pods is extremely important. That's what we're going to be following. And that's why, again, we've used both sites every year, and we thought by separating even more between the two schools in one of our parks, that would really help out in keeping the social distancing at bathrooms and different areas like that, some of the common areas. And of course, Ray School is ideal for out of all the locations, just because everything's sized for that age group already. So it makes it much easier.
Jay, did you want to add something? I saw your hand up a second ago.
I guess just to several points that we've been making, if you've read the guidelines that are attached to the agenda, I applaud John for even moving forward the planning when you look at what's required in terms of making sure that we're using that pod system as an element of what the concentric structure that allows you to help to even do the contact tracing, and then all the precautions that are necessary, making decisions about whether kids will mask, trying to have somebody assigned to monitor students so that they're honoring appropriate social distancing. It's a huge undertaking. And so I very much understand why John needs to figure out if he's got the availability of the buildings to start. I think to Tim's earlier point, we are going to have to be able to answer the question about why are we not able to bring our own students in, but we're able to use our buildings for this purpose. That's something for us to hash out and decide on. You do have an action item tonight, just in case the board feels it has enough information to take a vote this evening.
To be clear, Jay, you need us to make a decision tonight, right?
I think John needs you to make a decision. John, you can speak for yourself. I mean, it's like, when's your drop dead for making this decision? Because we keep on waiting for more and more guidance from the state.
Right, and that's been our dilemma at the moment is, you're seeing all these other guidelines coming out for other states and nationally, and we're still in New Hampshire waiting on what our definitive answer is going to be on that. For us, we're moving forward as if we're going to have camp. That's been our mindset, so we're being very optimistic with that. So the drop dead deadline is more for the parents and the residents in Hanover and Norwich, because if all of a sudden we cancel camp, we're at full capacity right now and starting to build waiting lists. If we cancel, they're going to have to start scrambling on figuring out what am I going to do with my child for the summer.
Mm-hmm. Right. So in the interest of moving us forward, and I see Kim has her hand up and Dan has his hand up, I want us to sort of think about what additional information we need to make a decision tonight. So board members, if you can think, what additional information do you need to be able to say yes or no, or yes, but that I think that's where we need to move our conversation at this point. So Kim, and then Dan, and then John.
Thanks. My question is simple. Can we, as a school board, decide to open schools for educational purposes, or is that definitely off the table?
For the full year school you're talking about.
For education, for our students with IEPs. Mm-hmm. Is that even an option we can flex?
Jay?
Yeah, we can, as long as we're following the social distancing rules. We could bring people in. We've been acting out of an abundance of caution not to do that, but we've been told throughout this whole thing that if we needed to bring small numbers of students with special needs in to receive their services, that we could do that. Mm-hmm. And again, we've been, and Rhett's not here to share our approach, but we feel that we've been able to provide services through the remote vehicle to support our students so far. So we could do that in small groups.
Okay. Dan?
Yes, I just want to be clear on, if we vote yes, are we voting yes to open camps subject to the rules in document X about, whatever? I mean, there was 82 pages of processes and policies. So are those the rules of engagement, or are we approving the principle of opening with Ellie, the principle of opening the schools for camps subject to a final determination about what the rules are? That's my only question.
That's a good clarification. Yeah, Jay?
And I would turn to Tony and maybe Jamie about our capacity to support that sort of work as far as making sure the buildings are then cleaned and appropriately disinfected for later use.
Right. And I'll defer to Tony, but my original and initial feeling, I'm going to put my video down. Hold on. I'm going to stop my video because I see that my thing is unstable. My initial feeling on it was that if we do embark on this, we need to revisit the MOU that we have with the town about what cleaning would look like and disinfecting, and that we'd have to come to an agreement on, you know, who'd be doing it, and it may require that more folks are hired and it's on their dime, not ours. That's my feeling, my initial feeling on it.
Tony, did you want to add
Tony?
anything to that?
Yeah, can you hear me? Yep. Okay. I've looked into it. So in the past, our service for summer camps probably in totaled about 30 to 40 minutes a day. If, you know, we pick up the trash, we clean the public bathrooms, and we provide emergency services for a spill or something like that. And then we do security for the building after the day camp would leave, which again would only impact our crews, one or two gentlemen or women, for about 40 minutes. In John's initial request, he wanted to know if our custodial staffs could clean up after their camps. And I'm not sure we can do that and also do the work that we need to do to get the buildings ready, again, if we would come back in the fall. So that's all, because I haven't quite timed it out, but I would guess that would be an increase, you know, of a couple hours per 2 or 3 custodians to clean up after, like at the Ray School, 11 classrooms, and then 3 or 4 public bathrooms, or 6 doorknobs, touch points, surfaces. You know, it's a fair amount of cleaning and disinfecting on a daily basis that we normally don't do in the summer. We tend to do deep cleaning in the rest of the building while activities are going on in certain parts of our buildings. I do want to support the Hanover and Norwich Rec. I know we're not talking about Norwich Rec, but they're both asking for facility space. I just don't know. I just don't know if we can provide cleaning services. That might have to be subcontracted out.
Okay, thanks. John, did you want to ask your question?
Yeah, just quickly, because we are talking about this and it's essentially affecting 2 different school boards. If this went to a vote, does this just okay it or not okay it for just Richmond Middle School, or Richmond Middle School and the Ray School? Because I would think it would have to go to a vote to the Hanover School Board for the Ray School. So I guess that's just more of a clarifying question on procedure.
Yeah, especially since Lauren isn't on tonight to weigh in. And I know she shared essentially concerns similar to Tim's. So
I think I saw her name on there.
Oh, is
she's
she?
an attendee.
Oh, Lauren, you're here. Hi, Lauren.
So I'm going to put her on the spot.
Lauren, I'm sorry. Did you want to say anything about the Ray School to the extent that this decision may impact, obviously, the Ray School as well? No? Lauren, are you there?
She had wanted
I'm
to
working
speak.
on it.
That's why she's here.
There you are. Hey.
Hi, everyone. I am so sorry. I didn't realize I would be called up to panelists. I'm sitting outside on my porch. So I guess I would, sorry, Kelly, what'd you say?
I said you've been promoted. Go ahead.
Okay. I guess what I would like to share, what I would like to share is that we have a very long relationship with Hanover Rec, and one that we treasure very much. for the services that they provide to our students and our families. When we think about how to proceed, it's, for me, does not feel like a question of whether or not camps should occur, because we all know we're trying to support our Hanover community and our Hanover families, but a matter of the facility that would make the most sense, whether it's a Hanover facility, a Dresden facility, or something outside the box that perhaps we haven't even considered. I am, most concerned about the fact that we've actually canceled camps for our students, as mentioned before, who have IEPs. So traditionally, we do host a summer camp for students with social needs. And that camp is not going to occur at the Ray School. It's difficult from a school administrative perspective to say that we're canceling our camps that help address student goals in IEPs, but we're opening the school for other types of camps. So from a community perspective, I certainly want to find a way to make this work for Hanover Rec, because we just appreciate them so much. From an administrator standpoint, the use of our building feels very tricky right now. I certainly appreciate the opportunity to share my thoughts with this group, and I'm happy to continue to be on this call as long as need be, as we sort of come to a conclusion about what we do next.
Thanks, Lauren, and thanks for for hanging with us tonight. Neil, why don't you go ahead and
Just briefly, on top of the concerns that other folks have raised, I just want to make sure that whatever solution we employ, make sure that we take into consideration the health and safety of our own employees. So those folks that are still going to be in the buildings over the summer, and especially make sure that we're not putting them in a position that either A, makes them uncomfortable, or B, raises some concerns related to any union negotiated contracts or the grievance process.
Yep. Thanks, Neil. Very good points. So at this point, I'd like to move us forward, and I'd like someone to consider motion language that doesn't have to be what's in board docs right now. And I think that motion language could very well be somewhat open. To Dan's point, it could be that we will, allow or empower the superintendent to make decisions in the best interest of the schools and the community based on state guidance. I mean, I think there are ways to craft a motion that don't make this a final decision, but that allow us to move forward based on the information that we have now. With that said, I'd like to move us forward and ask someone who's crafty to craft a motion later in the meeting, because I do think we need to give some guidance on this. I don't think we can keep kicking it down the road. We have to give some guidance based on what we know right now. Thank you all. And John, is there anything else that you felt you wanted to share or add before we move on to the next item?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
Happy that we had an opportunity to have this conversation, and like everybody has said, we have had a very good collaborative relationship. That's why I was very happy to be able to sit here and have this conversation and talk about all the different options that we have for summer camp. And again, if you have any other questions, just definitely give me a call or email me.
Thanks so much, John. Okay, so moving on. Oh, yep, Ben?
And then just to echo John Hunt's question of like, are we doing all schools tonight, or are we doing Dresden schools tonight?
I think we can only decide for Dresden schools. That being said, I think we can decide as a board to empower the administration to make a decision based on the best information that they have. And I could be wrong on that, but I think, Jay, does that sound like it might be a reasonable course of action at this point?
Yeah, it doesn't. I don't think it provides John the certainty that he'd prefer. But I mean, if they revise their guidance and decide to act more cautiously, that certainly would change John's plans and it might change our willingness to move forward. If something happens with COVID-19 specifically, if cases increase, or if we need to have the ability to call an audible essentially and say, I don't think so. But But I think if you did do something that was a little more tentative, that said like proceed cautiously and in conjunction with state guidance, I think Jamie and I could work with that, and work with the principals to make sure that we're being as careful as we can.
Yeah, I mean, I don't feel like, to Ben's point, to John's point, and Rick's comment in the chat, I don't feel that we as a Dresden board have the power to say this is what Hanover is going to do with the race school. So I think to some extent we are limited in terms of what we can say, yes, full speed ahead on in this forum. I think we can give certain okays, but I don't feel that we as a board have the authority to say what the race school will do. Yeah, Jay?
Right, but I think that by your votes, the Hanover contingent may be tipping their hand.
As is often the case. Yes, Ben?
Well, just, for me, it's a slightly different question, because, like I could see board members saying, well, we want it just at one school, so we will say no to Richmond tonight with a little bit of a wink for let's talk about Hanover next week. So it'd be good to clarify, I guess, if we are seriously interested in two schools or whether it's actually going to end up being one school.
So that's a good point of clarification. My understanding is, at this point, the plan that we are being asked to consider is both schools. I think in terms of space and in terms of what they would need to go forward, it would have to be both schools. And it sounds like the high school for Hanover Parks and Rec was dismissed as a possibility because it's not set up for the kids the age groups that they are working with. That is my understanding of what we're being asked to consider. So I don't think that we can change that and say, you can only have this one building, right? We're being asked to consider both buildings. I think we need to look at it that way. That is the motion that they are putting forward. Right? So I'm seeing, okay, apologies. I'm seeing a couple more questions in the chat. People are asking, are we empowered to reopen the schools for educational purposes in light of the summer camps? So can we go back, I guess is the question, can we go back on that decision to not have full year school kids in the buildings this summer? Jay?
Unless someone is getting information that I'm not, we have not, the school closure directive from the governor has not been lifted. But all along, they've been saying that if you had students with special needs and you were able to safely bring them in, and they're talking about individual students or really small groups of students, that you could bring them in, and as long as you're practicing proper social distancing and hygiene measures. They've been telling us that all along. But larger groups greater than 10 in a single confined space, we're still under the same order. That has not been lifted.
Right. I guess the question that people are asking, though, is the same guidelines, right? The eight kids and no more than 2 staff members. If we could do full year school in that model, could that be revisited? That's what I understand the question to be. Yeah, Jay.
So I love Ben's point that many questions have been answered directly. This is the frustration we are all running into. When we have our briefings from the DOE, it's just like this. It's a circular conversation that ends with no answer. And it's truly because they just don't have a good answer yet. There's people are very, very hesitant to make a commitment to open things wide open, and then see an increase in cases. And it's a real problem for people like John. And there's almost a double standard. Because we're trying to reopen our economies, the governors and the DOEs are being turned to provide childcare. The college is thinking about what its next moves are going to be, and I've been contacted by a committee that they have, wanting to know if we're going to have our elementary schools open so that they'll have childcare. So we really, there's like almost one set of guidelines for school as we know it, and another for schools serving as this place to care for kids so people can go back to work. And we don't have clear guidance on that. And so Ben, like very, very succinctly captured the frustration I think we're all working under.
I
There
try.
are no clear answers.
So that being said, we are being asked to make a decision, though, to authorize something, right?
Yeah,
So I keep
because you
bringing
can't
us back
stop
to that.
time, right? We can't stop the calendar, and
Right.
August is gonna get here. June's gonna get here, and we can't stop that.
So I see Dan's hand, and then I am going to propose that we move on with the discussion, because we don't, there's a lot we don't know, right? And we're going to have to make some decisions knowing that we don't know a lot of things. Unfortunately, that's the world that we're in right now. Dan.
Okay, I think the one thing is, I mean, with respect to this question about schools, I mean, even though the discussion item here is summer camp and summer schools, I think we've just been talking about summer camp.
Right.
And we haven't really addressed summer school programming per se.
Yes, what we were talking about, I think the question was about students with IEPs, not
Yes.
summer school.
Right.
Students with IEPs who qualify for a full year school. That's what FYS is, full year school program.
Right, but I just anyway, I just wanted to say that so said that. So the other piece just about approving something is I mean, given what Tony said, like I'm not entirely sure how we could approve something absent a budget or absent some notion of staffing. You know, and so what Tony said and what Jamie said about revisiting the costs of this thing. I mean, I'm perfectly happy. I mean, as a straw man to approve whatever, to give John license to move forward, to give us the next step, because but we just have no details. I mean, I'm absolutely not comfortable saying yes, you can run camps under whatever, you know, guidelines you say. I want a plan. I mean, and I would encourage John to construct a 2-school plan and a 1-school plan, and then to work with Tony and Jamie about what the budgetary impacts are. And we can, I mean, if we need to see that in a week, that's fine. But I feel like I feel like that's where we're at.
Yeah, I do think to that point, I think our motion could be that it needs to be budget neutral for the school district. I think that could be part of that the cost needs to be passed on to the families or the town, that any additional cost needs to be budget neutral for the school district. I mean, that could be part of our language, if that's the right thing to do. Jay?
I was just going to say that we're looking at the likelihood of having an SAU 70 meeting on June 9th as scheduled. We're playing this continual game of kick the can down the road on these decisions. And I mean, there's the gamble that maybe we'll get more, you know, some clearer guidance by then. I guess I would ask John what his drop dead date is, because he's waiting too. He's waiting for the final, instead of the final draft, he's waiting for the final guidance about camps. And we too are waiting for direction. So I don't know how far we can punt it. We're looking at possibly changing our dates for our June meetings for both Hanover and Dresden later in the agenda tonight. But I think John probably has a start date that he's proposing that's earlier than that. John, when is the date that you are contemplating starting up?
June 29th is the date of the first day of summer camp.
Okay. So that would be really pushing it, because we're looking at the 23rd and 25th for Dresden and Hanover.
Yeah, that'd be definitely too late.
Yeah. The 9th would be the next SAU meeting.
I mean, we could certainly do a special meeting if that is what made sense to do. We have to move forward. So I keep seeing hands pop up. We can't talk about this one all night. We have other items to talk about. If anyone has a closing, this is the deciding thing that's going to make it all go away or make it all easy, I'd love to hear it. Otherwise, I'm going to propose that we move forward. Ben?
I would just add that, you know, regardless of individual opinions or politics on the subject, many parents are getting called back into work physically over the span of the next couple of weeks. And that hasn't been discussed at all. And for better or worse, the parents need to have the kids go somewhere. And these are both sizable institutions. In my personal kids experience, I would say about half the camps have been canceled, but there are still many others that are opening. Vins, Montshire, all those places are scheduled to open for better or worse. And we have to keep that in mind too.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Sorry, I do see one last question that I think would be helpful for board members to have an answer to. John, Anissa asked, what other locations have the rec centers considered?
We haven't really considered anything else besides the 2 schools and Tenny Park. Tenny Park is a location we've never used before. In the past, we've had kindergarten through 4th grade at Ray School, and then we've had the tweens at middle school. We've moved the tweens to Tenny Park so we could again have that social distancing, and also important for us was we really needed to have drop off in the morning. We need to expand that because we have to do a pre-drop off screening, health screening, and by separating locations, that allows us to do it in a more efficient manner in the morning as parents are dropping their kids off before going to work. So having these 3 different locations is really key to kind of spread that out, because it is going to be a bit of traffic in the morning as, we consolidate all to one spot. You really can't do that morning drop off efficiently.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right, I'm going to move us forward. If we get to the motion point and we just don't feel like we can make any kind of motion, then that will be what it is. I know there's a lot we don't know. I also know that we need to at least allow people to continue to make decisions and make plans as things start to change. And unless we're going to meet every night to see what's changed, we have to have something that empowers people to make some decisions. So I'd ask you just to think about that as we move forward. So the field turf surplus discussion, fortunately, we've already had a very lengthy discussion about this, and our administrative team took that to heart and made some recommendations around that. So I'm hoping that this is a quick item for tonight. Jamie.
Okay, so I'm not going to read the screen because everybody can read it. This was a conversation that was had between myself and Tony, Tony, and I think Justin was involved, and then also in follow-up after the Dresden Budget Committee meeting in discussions with Kim. It's like light bulbs go off sometimes, and the more you talk it through. And so we're not on a strict deadline for this summer to do something with these funds that weren't necessary. So it made sense in talking through it with everybody to hold off on doing anything right now. Let the monies that we had originally budgeted in the Dresden budget for potentially doing some equipment updates down there to flow through to surplus. And then reevaluate in mid-August to see if fall sports are going to be able to be held. If we find that fall sports are able to be held, then we would come back to you to see if we would be able to replace the pads, and we have 2 quotes now, with a portion of this money because it wouldn't need all of it. And then if fall sports were not going to be held, because predominantly, these are for the football type of, because they're running so fast and smacking their heads into stuff, it's more contact, that we could hold off on anything with regards to spending the money down there, let it flow back to the principal of the loan, and then budget for it through the next budget cycle. So those were our thoughts. So at this point in time, basically this is to update you on all the conversations that have been had, and to ask you to sit tight for more information.
And to be clear, this does not require a motion this evening.
No, ma'am.
Okay, super. Any questions or clarifications? Great, thank you guys for handling that It seems like I'm unstable. Can you guys hear me still okay?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay,
You
super.
you don't seem unstable.
That's a good one. Just wait till we hit 11 o'clock. Kidding, I'm kidding, I'm kidding. We're not going to 11. I promised we wouldn't do that. Okay, so moving right along to the last item for discussion, an update on the associate principal and I forget what the other one was, principal searches.
All right. So I feel like I'm almost ready to start. I think for a retirement job, I'm going to start a search service because it seems in the last 2 years we've had a lot of administrator search committees going. So as far as the principal and the associate principal go, we actually have another organizational meeting with the principal search committee for HHS tomorrow. We'll be getting together to finalize our interview questions and to work on our protocol for interviews that will be held on Thursday and Friday. We had a total of 17 candidates for the principal job, and we were able to winnow that field down to 8 that we've invited for interview. So we'll be doing 3 on Thursday and 5 interviews on Friday. So the team will be very busy. We have a big team. We have really, I think, broad representation. We have your 2 board member representatives in Kelly Hersey and Rick Johnson. We've got 2 parents. We have 2 students. We have a number of teachers representing a variety of disciplines and roles, including counseling and special education. We've got 2 administrators, and then I'm serving as chair. So it's going to mean that not everyone gets to ask an interview question in a 45-minute interview. But we're counting on the second round as being the more inclusive. And we're also counting on the results of the initial round of interviews making the determination about whether or not we proceed or go to an interim. If we don't find somebody who really impresses us, especially since we're in a Zoom format, and we're not comfortable saying, hey, this person looks great, then we can't move forward. And it's kind of fun because Tim sits on the committee as an administrative representative, and Tim was in Louisiana when we went through that process, and I think we did a really good job on the RMS search. So I haven't given up by any stretch. I think we got some strong candidates, and we're going to move full steam ahead until we get to a point where we get stuck. And it may well be that we have a great candidate among the field that we've got. So on the associate principal side, we have, I'm really excited. I did an interview with Deb Beaupre, who was the prevailing candidate in the associate principal search. And you have, the board members have her information, I think, in either, I think it's in administrative or executive content. You can see that there. I had a wonderful conversation with her. I think she'll be a great addition to HHS. It's really unfortunate that we're in this COVID sort of scenario, but the ringer that the committee put the candidates through for the associate principal search, I kind of have had to back off and say, we're not going to do that to the principal candidates. I feel really, really good about that. And Julie's on the line here. Julie, do you want to speak about Deb real quick? I mean, we're gonna talk about her candidacy in non-public, but anything you can talk about publicly about the process.
Right. So we went through in the process. We went through 2 rounds: a writing prompt, a classroom observation, and then had all the candidates let us know how they would have evaluated that teacher and supervised that teacher. The committee, there were 12 of us in the committee, 2 students, worked really, really hard. We were lucky that we had a number of candidates who stuck with us, given that we pushed the process off a little bit. And we had a few that were really, really strong. There were a couple that we would have hired, any of them, of the 2 in the end that we really would have liked to hire. and Deb rose to the top of that pool. So I think I'm the last standing administrator at the high school right now. So I think that we will work really well together. I think she'll work really well with our staff. She is very interesting, has an interesting perspective, is very, very personable. I think our students will love her. I think our staff will find her thought-provoking, personable. I think we're going to be lucky. All of that being said, you never know, until someone's in the job. But our best guess here is she's going to be great, and I'm really excited to work with her.
So that's the status of the HHS principal and associate principal search.
Okay, great. Thank you. Questions at this point for Jay on either of those items? All right, super. Thank you so much. And thanks to everyone who's served and is serving on those committees. All right, so moving on to our business requiring action. What I would propose that we consider is a consent agenda for A, B, C, E, and F. So that's agenda topics, meeting schedules, expenditure approval, minutes, and non-public minutes. That would be my proposal. Does anyone have comments on those 5 items or object to a consent agenda for those 5 items? All right, super. I will take a motion then to approve those 5 items as presented.
So moved.
Thanks, Neil. Is there a second for Neil's eloquent motion? Rick, awesome. Thank you very much. And I will take a roll call vote then, starting with Kim.
Hartman, yes.
Lisa?
Christie, yes.
Ben?
Keeney, yes.
Marcella?
DeBlassi, yes.
Rick?
Johnson, yes.
Dan?
Rockmore, yes.
Neil?
Odell, yes.
Kelly?
Percy, yes.
Garrett?
I don't think I vote on this anymore, right? Is that the
Oh,
rule?
correct. So sorry, Garrett. Thank you for
No
your
problem.
service, Garrett. Tom?
Camden, yes.
And John?
Hunt, yes.
I get everybody yes. And McConnell, yes. All right, super. So moving on then to the approval of the Friends of Hanover Norwich grant. I always want to give our principals a chance to speak to this.
We just wanted to thank the Friends of Hanover Norwich Schools for stepping up and for fulfilling a need that we have during this crisis in trying to get books to students who have read everything in their houses and are clamoring to get more reading material, and to also then build both our library once the students have finished reading the books, or also read or create a small, it's called a little community library outside the school. So again, to sort of help the community and the school together.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Questions on this grant? Great. And again, a hearty thank you to the Friends of Hanover and Norwich for this contribution to our schools. I will take a motion. John?
Move to approve the Friends of Hanover Norwich grant in the amount of $5,400 for books at RMS during the COVID-19 closure as presented.
Thank you, John. And I think it's not just books, correct, Tim? Is it other things as well? Just point of clarification.
I'd have to read. I'm pretty sure it was just book. I mean, we
just
were
the
going
books
for
in this
books.
one. Okay, super.
Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you so much. All right, is there a second? Lisa, excellent. And I will take a roll call vote starting with Kim.
Hartman, yes.
Lisa?
Christie, yes.
Ben?
Keeney, yes.
Rick?
Johnson, yes.
Dan,
Rockmore, yes.
Neil,
Dale, yes.
Kelly,
Percy, yes.
Tom,
Shannon, yes.
John,
Hunt, yes.
Marcella,
DeBlassie, yes.
and McConnell, yes. Excellent. Moving on to the revised school calendar. Jay, did you want to speak to this?
So the school calendar revision, I tried to thwart this, but when we proposed the calendar, it went through numerous sets of eyes, through many boards, and apparently we missed the fact that our contract says that teachers can't start before the 25th. So I worked as recently as last Friday with Liz Murray to see if we could find some compromise solution. And the preference of the HEA is that we adjust the calendar. So all we've done is change the start date by 1 day and then move the end date by a day. So we're in compliance with the contract. So that's what the revision is.
All right.
It puts us at odds with again, Hartford Career and Tech Center is really the steering consideration for our calendar almost every year. But we already transport students because we're often off by a single day. So this will just mean that we're off by 2 days. So we'll provide transportation for our students that attend HACTC. And it really won't be a big issue.
Awesome. Any questions for Jay before we take a motion? All right, super. I will take a motion then to approve the revised calendar. Kelly?
A move to approve the revised 2021 Dresden school calendar as presented.
Is there a second? Kim, thank you. And a roll call vote, please. Kim?
Hartman, yes.
Lisa?
Christie, yes.
Ben?
Heaney, yes.
Rick?
Johnson, yes. Sorry about that.
That's okay. Dan?
Rockmore, yes.
Neil?
Dale, yes.
Kelly?
Percy, yes.
Tom?
Shannon, yes.
John?
Hunt, yes.
Marcella?
DeBlassie, yes.
And McConnell, yes. All right. And so this is the last item that we have for consideration is the approval of summer camps. And so I'm going to look around and see if anyone has developed crafty language around this motion. No moving. Okay. So I'm not sure what that means if we have no motion. Ben?
I'm happy to initiate a motion. I'm just not sure, again, sort of how do we separate Hanover and Dresden here? That's my issue.
And I don't know if it needs to be a motion. My sense from the board, so I'll go ahead and be autocratic here. My sense from the board is that we are comfortable with the notion of exploring further in order to meet the needs of our community. But that we are very concerned about the logistics of what that might mean for our schools and our administrators and our custodial staff and all of our staff. So that is my sense. And I don't know, Jay, if you think we need a motion to say that we're game, but if that makes sense.
I'm thinking maybe something along the lines you had mentioned earlier of I guess authorizing the administration to continue to work with Hanover Parks and Rec in conjunction with state guideline, state direction.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't know how much more definitive we can be.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and just as I'm sorry, I'm thinking out loud a little bit, but my sense is that even those children who are some of the children who are able to receive extended year services, those kids are going to need childcare too, right? Because they're not in some of the programming that they would normally be in. So I think it's a need that is across the board and throughout our community. So I guess I would I see Rick's hand up. Rick, tell me you want to make a motion.
No, well, whatever motion we make, I would just make sure that there's a understanding that if and when a decision is made, that the Hanover School Board will have opportunity to weigh the decision too.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, Jay.
My guess is that we're going to have one or more boards have a special meeting at some point. There will be at some point some guidance, not just on this, but probably on other things as well.
Mm-hmm.
And we may have need of another meeting.
Okay. So could we make a motion at this point then? Neil, I see your hand up. Keep
Well,
open.
only well, I guess only for maybe a possible different approach, and that is no motion this evening. So essentially taking no action on this and allowing the administration and Hanover Parks and Recreation to continue to work on a plan. I just think that there are too many unknowns at this point in time.
Mm-hmm.
And while I do I certainly appreciate the need to try to see if we can get something in place for the summer, I think that we need some clarification on some things. So essentially no motion, allowing planning to continue, and then unfortunately looking at the need to schedule a special board meeting to take this up when hopefully we got a little bit more clarity on things.
Mm-hmm. I think that's what I'm sensing from the board in general. I think that's a really good suggestion, Neil. And John, I hope that you will take that as sort of a tentative head nod to continue planning. It's certainly not a no from the board. I just think we feel like we need more information before we can make definitive decisions on this. And in terms of special meetings, I will go ahead and say as board chair that I am very much aware that we may need to call multiple short special meetings in the coming weeks as need be to decide timely matters. And so to that extent, I think if there comes a point where you say, now we have this, this is our breaking point, we have to make the decision, I need a special meeting. I think the board is essentially saying we're ready and willing to make that happen. Okay. Super. Yeah, Neil.
And then the only other thing I would add, to hopefully to make John's life a little bit easier, to be clear on our side, what are the things that we are hoping? I mean, I think I really need to understand the cost of this thing and who's going to bear the cost on this. So there are certain answers to some questions that I think will definitely help this discussion move forward.
Mm-hmm.
And I would hate to just get all back together again and have all of those questions still remain unanswered.
Agreed. And I think John took down some of those. And if people have lingering questions that they would like to specifically have communicated, I think you can certainly send them to John, send them to Jay, or send them to me, and we can filter those to the places they need to go. And then the only thing, to Rick's point, is maybe what Rick's hand is. I think that when we call such a special meeting for this sort of decision, we would want to explicitly call it as a joint special meeting of Hanover and Dresden, so that we're empowered to kind of make that decision all in one space, if that's possible, something along those lines. Rick?
Yeah, I was going to suggest the joint meeting. That's if that's allowed, we should do that. But the other question is, we didn't talk about Marion Cross and Norwich, and I don't know how that plays. Do the kids from Norwich get to participate in the camps at our facilities? And if so, is there any issues out of Norwich, Vermont, or is Marion Cross going to be open for camps this summer? I just throw that out there as a potential issue that needs to be resolved.
Yeah, and I'll speak, I apologize to speak for my Norwich colleagues a little bit, but I think the reality, and normally we would make a somewhat even decision, I think, on the two sides of the river. The reality is that our state guidelines may very well be vastly different. And so I think that is definitely something that we're going to have to contend with down the road in a totally new way. Yeah, Tom.
And it will be a topic of discussion at our meeting next Wednesday, because the Norwich Rec Council has asked for space in and around the Marion Cross School.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. All right. Thanks, guys. So I think we'll revisit this probably sooner rather than later. And thank you all for engaging in this conversation. Moving on to committee reports, I'd asked everybody to kind of look ahead at the committee lists. I don't know that we need to go through it tonight. I'd said that if you see glaring errors, just so we have it recorded, I know that our policy committee is missing 2 members for some reason. Both Kelly Hersey should be on that, and Garrett, no, not Garrett, Ben, sorry, Ben Keeney, sorry, Garrett. Is that it? Those 3 members, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Were there any other, yeah, Kim?
Yeah, so I'm not on the strategic planning committee.
Yes, thank you.
And therefore no one is. So,
yeah. So strategic planning committee, and it is somewhat tabled, I think, for right now. But we will need to appoint a member to the strategic planning committee. So if any of our new members want to consider that as a future appointment, maybe reach out to me or to Jay. We can kind of fill you in on that. Yeah, Tom.
I just want to point out to Kelly, the way this spreadsheet's set up is helpful, but the negotiations on Dresden's side, I think those should be really listed under Dresden, because you can have Norwich members participating in those support staff and teacher negotiations. And I think Ben's going to need some support on the teacher negotiations side.
Sorry, you're looking at, the Hanover teacher negotiations. Yeah, I thought we had 2 people on that. Did we not?
It kind of hurt, Tom.
Well, if you want to take it by yourself, Ben, I'm happy to back you up on that as well.
It was, I mean, I did consider myself on that committee, and traditionally the way that we've handled it is the Dresden board handles the negotiations on behalf of both Dresden and Hanover, because it's the same association.
Gotcha. Okay, yeah, because it does cover the high school and middle school teachers as well, right? Okay, super. We'll make that change.
And the Ray school teachers too.
Right, and the Ray school. Yes. Yeah. In addition to the Ray school. Yes. Okay. If anyone else sees errors or omissions, please let me know, and we'll make sure that we make those switches. Okay. Excellent. Other updates from, so I kind of moved things around a bit to put our committee reports first this time around. So if we can kind of just go down the committee reports. I'll kick off since we're talking anyway. NHSBA, the one thing I wanted to call your attention to is the survey that hopefully you got through NHSBA in your inbox. And I know we're going to post the link to board docs someplace, somehow. I'm not sure if that's happened yet. And I'll try to get it up on the website as well. And I've asked Jay to send it out in his update. But there's a task force survey that has gone out, and they're asking everybody, parents, teachers, school board members, administration, everybody to answer it. And I think just trying to gather data, understand what the questions are, where the concerns are, where people are at on this. So if people can take the time to do that. Sorry, I'm getting some chats here. Okay, super. Other updates. Dan, did you want to do a quick Ed Committee update?
Sure. So we had our first meeting of the Ed Committee. Just getting Lisa Christie took some awesome notes. So I just to hit the big items, I guess, is that we want to make we talked a lot about the last 4 weeks of school, meaning 2 weeks of learning and the 2 weeks of the teacher prep. For next year, we talked a lot about the fact that it's not clear next year what kind of what school is going to look like in the fall, and how the preparation that we're doing now is going to have to serve whatever it is we do in the fall, and a big piece of that being what's going to be online, since it looks like no matter what. I mean, even were we back in school, if we were prepared in some way in an online fashion, that would serve us moving forward for next year and all years to come. So there was a lot of discussion about that. There were some long-term kind of thoughts about assessment and standardization and grading and things like that, and actually, and a lot of energy. I think it's fair to say. And we have another meeting. I think tomorrow, Jay. Is that right? I know I put it in my calendar. I can't remember.
That's right.
Yeah. So we're actually going to be meeting quite a lot certainly for the next couple of weeks.
And John just pointed out to me that's technically an SAU committee, so I apologize for putting it in here. But there we go. It's a good update to have anyway. So thank you, Dan, for that one. Any other committee updates to give this evening? I know that we're going to have the budget update in conjunction with the business administrator report. Yeah, Kelly.
It's very, very quick. The HACTC met, I think, the 5th of May, and they announced, it was a fairly concise meeting. They spent a lot of time discussing what we've been discussing about remote learning, but a very high point was that their current enrollment is the highest it's ever been. They budgeted, I think they said 325, and they have 370 for the upcoming year. Their STEM enrollment is down. We got a full long report about Perkins funding. They're returning $70,000. But the highlight was certainly the student. We had one student present who was a senior business administration student, and he did a very wonderful and professional presentation. So it was all positive. That's the report.
Awesome. Thank you, Kelly. Any other committees that have met for Dresden? I think many of our committees and liaisons are dormant at this point. So, all right, super. So moving on then to, I believe it's me next, right? Report of the chair. So as I mentioned, I think earlier, I'm going to propose that we move the June 9th meeting to Tuesday, June 23rd. So moving it back 2 weeks. And here's the survey. If you can see the survey posted there. Thank you, Jay, or whoever else posted that. So my proposal is to move it back so that we can have a chance to get more information across the district and from state guidelines as well. I think meeting in 2 weeks, there's just not going to be that much new to talk about, but I'm hopeful that after the teachers have had a chance to get together for those 2 weeks after the end of school, and administrators have had a chance to kind of step back a little bit and take stock, we will be able to do a little more work around next year. The only caveat to that is that we will likely need to do, as I said, some special meetings around decisions such as the summer camp decision, hiring of a principal, policy that is coming out that needs to be approved in a timely fashion. So I will ask the board's indulgence to potentially call very short approval meetings as we need them. So if I don't see any objections to moving to the 23rd, I'm kind of looking around. John? Yep.
The only thing to note is that we do have an SAU meeting that night on the 9th. But when we met for agenda planning today, Jay and I and Jamie, we discussed keeping the SAU meeting still on as scheduled, but it makes sense to move the Dresden meeting. But keeping the SAU still so we can discuss kind of things before the 2 weeks of teacher work, and then we'd have the opportunity to hear the reports when the Dresden and the Hanover boards meet later.
Mm-hmm.
Just one note.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, John. Yeah, Rick?
And just for everyone's situational understanding, we've talked about the Hanover School Board meeting being moved to Thursday, June 25th. So we won't have back-to-back meetings, but we're pushing that one back 2 weeks also.
Mm-hmm. Super. And I will will just note that June 9th, for anyone that involves, is the potential 8th grade graduation night as well. So there is a conflict there I'm aware of as well. So that wasn't the reason for pushing back the meeting, but it is nice that our administrators won't have as much of a conflict that evening. Jay?
Really, the big thing we have for the SAU meeting is we have one mandated policy, actually a couple of policies we were hoping to present for a first read at the SAU. One of which is suicide prevention, which is a state mandated policy that we need to have in place. And the other is essentially a conflict of interest type policy that we want to make sure we have on the books as well. So at least those two, maybe more. The policy committee meeting we just had was the first we've had in a long time. And we're hoping to be able to get some stuff before you soon.
All right, super. Okay, so seeing no objections, I'll assume we're moving the Dresden back to the 23rd, keeping the SAU at 6 o'clock on the 9th. And it should probably be a pretty brief meeting that evening. All right, excellent. Thank you so much, everyone. Superintendent's report.
As a lot of these
Nothing to report, right, Jay?
Yeah, not much to report. Again, I hope I'm not like oozing frustration, not having answers to provide. I feel bad. I'm asked lots of questions every single day that I simply can't answer. And that's just the nature of this situation we're all in. The same thing's happening at every level. As soon as we have anything definitive, we'll make sure that you're aware and that I'll inform our school community. I'm way overdue for an update. I'll be sending one out tomorrow. I wanted to wait till after this meeting. Maybe to reassure people that there is uncertainty, but we are working on it. We're just waiting for that guidance. In the lead up to making the decision about whether or not to close the schools, I had experts within our community, all of them legitimate experts, people who are pediatricians and epidemiologists and infectious disease people, all had differing opinions on whether we should continue to go to school or not. And they were all, like I said, experts in their own right. But we waited for state guidance. We waited for public health, our local public health agency, and made a decision together. I think in hindsight, and we were lucky, the decision was the right one. Going all the way back to Matt Prince and our March intensives. If we had sent our kids abroad when those things were scheduled, they would have been there for quite some time probably. Not taking credit for that, it's just kind of luck. And erring on the side of caution. We'll continue to err on the side of caution. We have a meeting scheduled for another meeting tomorrow. I think it's tomorrow with our nurses and next week. Next week, we're meeting with our nurses, our district. Thursday, our district.
Thursday
this week, Thursday. Okay, Doctor, we're actually meeting with Dr. Chapman, our nurses, Jamie, Tony, to hear what the parameters are for medical considerations about reopening. And Dr. Chapman's been very vocal about his feeling that kids need to be back in school and seeing each other. So it'll be very interesting to have that conversation with him. And what does that mean? And how much interaction can we provide safely? Those are all things we don't know. We're feeling our way through this, and we could just get a pronouncement from Governor Sununu that tells us what we've got to do. It's a really uncomfortable place to be when you're someone charged with a, mapping a route through a crisis like this, but it's where we are. Jamie, I can't say enough about the work you're having to do trying to look at all this stuff that's going on and figure out how the heck we're going to pay for it. But she's doing it, and we'll try to tap into the CARES money that we can, and again, keep our kids safe, keep our staff safe, and try to get back to providing the kind of education that we love to provide and that we're known for. So that's a challenge, and we're working on it together. We're not holding back information. We're sharing it as soon as we get it, and we're in some cases making a decision in the dark. So I will, again, do my best to try to provide answers as soon as we have them. And I really appreciate your patience. I know it's hard for you too. You're being asked questions all the time, and you as parents. And everybody on that board has multiple roles, and I know it's frustrating for you as well. But we'll work our way through this. And bottom line is, we'll keep our people safe first before everything else. And I guess that's my report.
Thanks, Jay. And sort of as a segue into our business administrator report, Lisa reminded me that I forgot to mention CPP, and I did get to attend CPP, which was sort of a joint, that's the Committee on Policies and Procedures at the high school. And I did get to attend that. It was sort of a joint CPP and staff meeting. And just as we are looking at the budgets in sort of triplicate, if you will, you know, what if we're fully remote? What if we're fully in the building? And what if we're doing something in between, whatever that means? I know our staffs at the various buildings are trying to plan for all three of those scenarios. And so there's just so much work going on behind the scenes, and I'm grateful to all the work that everyone is doing on all of that. And with that, I'll kick it to Kim, who is gonna kick things off for the business side of things.
Could I say one thing, Kim?
Just one, Jamie.
Well, I'd love to take credit for, you know, working our way through this crisis. I have to say that it's always a team effort, and the fellow administrators I work with are quite simply amazing. And they've been very instrumental in figuring out, you know, what the next 6 months look like. So it's always, as you know, a team effort, along with the guidance of our budget committee members. So thank you.
Thank you, Jamie. I was kidding about the one thing, by the way. That was a joke. Late night jokes. Kim.
Thanks. So because it is a late night, I will try to give the Cliff Notes version of the update. I know I was asked to give about a 10-minute update, but I will try to beat that. So first, as a quick refresher, most of us know this, but just in case there are those who don't, because our towns have already voted on the Dresden budget, we must raise that amount next year, at least in New Hampshire. And so any savings or reductions in the 2021 budget that we may recommend as a budget committee will help taxpayers, but only the following year. So the main way we could reduce taxpayer concern and burden this year is to save as much as possible in our current budget year, the 19-20 budget. And so we can use that carryover for the 2021 offset. So as of the last meeting we all met, we kicked off the budget committee meetings this month, and it was primarily focused on updating the current year forecast to see you know, where those potential savings could be. We held one dedicated meeting for each school in our district, RMS, and then later Hanover High, and actually RMS joined that one because of the kind of similar questions that we discussed. The budget committee will then analyze and make recommendations on the future, so next year's budget, the 2021 budget, particularly related with what we will do with our different levers, primarily the Dresden retainage. And we'll talk about that in the early summer is the plan, and we should have better guidance on what the fall would actually look like. And there are some documents in the business administrative report section. We may reference this, but in the spirit of being concise, really these are the kind of key points. So first, we currently expect, as of the last forecast, to have at least $700,000 in an unassigned surplus that could be used to help next year's taxes. So this is something that is like true surplus, let's call it like that, and that could be carried over. Half of the 700,000 is eligible for retainage, and that we need to vote on whether we retain again or use it to offset taxation next year. So we would keep it for unexpected emergency funding, possibly COVID related if we don't have grants to fund that, or return to taxpayers. So that would kind of help manage the towns and taxpayer cash flows or help fund any shortfalls that may occur. and not have towns take out the tax anticipation notes. So that's kind of where we are at the end of the year forecast. So if we were to take those forecasts and under certain assumptions, which I can go into, it is possible that in Hanover specifically, and I'll leave it to Jamie to discuss Norwich, and I love that there will be a Norwich Finance Committee that we can kind of get more of a Norwich flair of this. But in Hanover, we could have an almost flat tax rate year over year next year due to some combination, and I say almost, it's projected here to be about a 1/16% increase due to some combinations of the savings that we talked about due to our school closures or use of some retainage. That being said, we also, so that's kind of the tax rate where we're at currently. That does assume that we fully, that almost flat tax rate, we fully would use all of the Dresden retainage, the whole $700,000, let's just say, will kind of go into helping taxpayers. We also discussed as a budget committee the risks and opportunities. Probably we can think of that there are more risks than opportunities, but the opportunity could be, you know, we asked Jamie to look into whether we could finance debt because we're in a lower market rate, and unfortunately, the majority of our debt is issued via bond banks, and that can only be refinanced every 10 years. And we last refinanced it in 2014, so unfortunately that's a little off the table. Going to risks, in 2021, we discussed that there's tuition uncertainty if we remain in a remote learning environment. A question was asked whether we would continue to have as strong of a tuition student presence for those that are more discretionary. We asked if any tuition students had withdrawn as we transitioned this year, and the answer was no. And actually we've had at least one, I believe, added, primarily due to they were studying abroad and needed to come back. So kind of interesting risks from that perspective. We also talked about kind of timing. When do we need to make decisions? So two key areas was hiring is one. We discussed with administration and actually it was a mutual recommendation by the budget committee, including administration, to delay the WIN tutor. And if Tim wants to explain more of that, I'm happy to share that. Due to a variety of reasons. Two, we also discussed that administration was delaying at least the hiring or starting later this year of the assistant superintendent. And I'm sure Jay could probably talk more about that. And some other decisions that were already made were not backfilling turnover in custodial positions over the summer. Again, some of our decisions may impact some of those previous planned decisions. And then there was also kind of discussing whether to move forward with the high school principal and associate principal, which we just discussed as an update tonight. And also the support staff contracts on kind of when to send. So those are still, a lot of those are still kind of questions or just kind of updates. So the second piece as far as timing is what the board should consider. And I think the budget committee will kind of convene this summer to develop a recommendation is what to do with the retainage. My personal recommendation is to wait as long as possible to make the decision, just so we know as much as we can, so we can wait until the end of September, which will give us with more information if we need to tap into that or not. We'll also have a better idea of what to expect for state and local funding. And kind of moving on to like the last bit of my update, if I'm almost wearing my Hanover Finance Committee hat now as the rep there. So just to give you an update on that front. So Hanover Select Board voted to delay the June, so tax bills are typically paid in Hanover on June 1, and the select board, as of last week, decided to delay the due date, essentially, or I think technically it's they would not charge a late charge for a month delay. So basically tax bills are going to be delayed by July 1. Why that could be a potential of concern for the school is we get our funding from those, or at least the Hanover side, right? So from those proceeds raised. And so if they have a month delayed, and if hopefully taxpayers will pay on time, but there was a chance that, we can kind of have this mismatching of cash flows. Luckily, the school side, June 1 versus July 1 isn't as much of a difference as if they could have delayed until September 30th. And luckily they did not do that. And actually Jamie and the rest of her team have done a tremendous job putting together a very detailed cash flow and sent it over to Betsy at the town and actually both towns, to help them estimate the size that they would need. So Hanover Town also said that they, so this is good news, that that they should be able to keep their head above water in 2021 and not planning as of now to take out any tax anticipation notes. And the select board also indicated, which is interesting as of the last meeting, that they are not interested in reopening the town's, so this is the town's adopted budget ahead of the June town vote, because although the school has voted, the town has not. And so they are proceeding with their adopted budget that they adopted in early March as of now. And so that's essentially it from the Hanover side. And I know that there is a lot of moving parts and actually good news to be communicated on the Vermont side, which I might look to Jamie to kind of help summarize on that. But as far as next steps for the budget committee, we asked administration to prepare those, as Kelly mentioned, those kind of 3 scenarios as to help us understand the sizing of what each of those scenarios could be, and whether we would need to tap into that retainage or not. And finalize, if need be, any remaining hiring discussion, timing questions. And start the last thing is to start a communication plan with our community to try to help them understand what we've already done to date and what we're kind of planning to do, and to make sure that the tone is set with what the board would like to communicate. So that is it.
Thank you, Kim.
And if Jamie wants to talk about, I didn't want to ignore on the Norwich side, I just I'm not an expert on it.
Thanks.
So I don't know that I'm an expert either. I think the expert's sitting down here on the left corner of our screen. Anyway, in Norwich, because there are different parameters which drive tax rate, the same is true in Norwich, where it's been budgeted and ratified, we have to raise all of the monies. A different assessment out of Dresden to Norwich would allow for Norwich to absorb any revenue shortfalls that may come down from the state and or within its own projected budget. So any changes on the Dresden assessment will provide some relief to Norwich as well. Won't affect the tax rate like it does in New Hampshire because the tax rates are set earlier. We're still waiting for 2 parameters, the yields basically in Norwich, to be set. I've not been notified that they've been voted on, although Neil may have updated information, more updated than I have. What they did do was confirm that the estimated equalized pupil count had gone up. The ratified number is 603.34. So I ran some early calculations based on that, and based on what the yields they had been talking about for yields. They have not been ratified yet, so it's still in draft format. That's why I have not posted it here. But it would basically, if everything holds true to what we know, on the projections of yields, because the state of Vermont did not want to pass this on to their taxpayers, the burden. The estimated nominal tax rate would go up about $0.0125 over last year's rate. That's assuming where the yields end up, and we don't know that for a fact. I'm basing it on some of the early information that came in. But again, Norwich has to raise the same amount because we have to have our budget reported by this Friday. But the change in the Dresden assessment, depending on what occurs with the retainage number, would absolutely allow Norwich a little bit of flexibility in having to absorb any potential revenue shortfalls or clawbacks from the state of Vermont. I'd say if Neil or Tom want to add anything, because
They don't look like they want to add anything, right? Tom, do you want to add
No, I think as always, Jamie pretty much nailed it, and is getting a lot more information in some cases than we are directly because of her work with the business administrators throughout the state of Vermont, and the information that we're getting directly from the Agency of Education and their finance director there too. We are meeting on Thursday with representatives from the town of Norwich to discuss planning for FY21 as well. So town manager, town treasurer, and one member of the select board as well to discuss that. So we can provide more of an update on that discussion later in the week too.
Great. Right, thank you. Jamie, anything else?
no, but it looked like Kim had something to add there.
Oh yeah, sorry. Hi, Kim.
Hi. Sorry, I forgot to, this was actually hot off the presses. I had a Hanover Finance Committee meeting at 5 p.m. tonight. And there was communicated that the town is actually, this is good news, the town is anticipating a higher net asset valuation than was previously conservatively estimated. So the year-over-year change from 1920 to 2021 was going to be $8 million increase, which any increase in net asset valuation basically means that the tax burden is spread across more people, so the tax rate decreases. So luckily, due to increased building permits that weren't anticipated at the time, and actually kind of a better than anticipated ruling on abatements, so it was more favorable to the town a bit. The combination of those two things means that the net asset valuation is not going to go up by 8 million as of currently projected. It's now at 20 million. So 20 million higher. So that change actually changes the tax rate in Hanover by 0.5%. So kind of that, so if we're kind of at that almost flat right now, using the full Dresden retainage, that lowering it by another 0.5% means that we could potentially be in a decrease state, which I think that is all very good news. If there's any good news when I'm looking at this agenda, I mean, I think our financial, at least I'm feeling more, it's a roller coaster, but I'm feeling more confident than when we originally started the budget committee personally. I know other people can feel different and it can change any day. But I do want to communicate that at least what I'm hearing seems to be kind of a more of a positive wave. And I know that's just in Hanover. So thanks.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments for business administrator or for Kim? Thank you guys. I do know I'm on one of the budget committees, so I know how much work's going into this. And Jamie, I know you're doing all the crunching behind the scenes. So really, thank you, thank you, thank you. We can't
With my
thank you.
team.
With your team, of course. Yes. And all the administrators. And yes, thank you. Okay, so I will take a motion to enter non-public session. Jay, you can't move
I
to
just want to
non-public session.
No, I know I can't. But I just wanted to mention that Deb Beaupre, our associate principal for HHS candidate, is among the attendees, and I'm hoping she can stick around until we come back out of non-public because she'd love to meet the board.
Awesome. And thank you. And Deb, welcome. I know we'll get a chance to hopefully meet you in a minute, but if board members can copy the link for the non-public that you see in the chat, that's the easiest way for us to go into non-public. And then for people who are watching at home, we will re-enter the public session in this same spot. So you guys can just hang out for the return to public session where we'll essentially just be approving a bunch of positions that you can see in the board docs. Yeah, Justin?
Well, Kelly or Jay, do you need me for non-public?
Yes, Justin, Julie, Tim and Anissa, you're welcome as well, because I believe we have hires for both HHS and RMS. That'd be great.
Rick, did you have a question or you want to move?
I wanted to make a motion.
I'd love for you to make a motion. Thank you, Rick.
Move to enter into non-public session under RSA 91-A:3 to C personnel as presented.
Second.
Okay, thank you, Kelly. I think that was Kelly seconding. So I'll take a roll call starting with Ben. Sorry, y'all rearranged.
Heaney, yes.
Rick?
Johnson, yes.
Garrett, I think you do vote on this one. I think you do.
Garrett, then yes.
Okay, Tom?
Candon, yes.
Marcella?
DeBlasi, yes.
Kim?
Hartman, yes.
Kelly?
Did you say Kelly?
I did.
Hersey, yes. I'm sorry, Kelly.
Neil?
Odell, yes.
Lisa?
Christy, yes.
John?
Hunt, yes.
Dan?
Rockmore, yes.
And McConnell, yes. All right. Thank you so much. All right, thank you guys for your patience with us. Still have 2 attendees. All right, I will take a motion to accept all of the nominations by consent agenda. All the nominations as presented by consent agenda. Kelly.
Move to approve the list of nominations by consent agenda as presented.
Is there a second? Ben? And I will take a roll call starting with all administrators. Ben?
Heaney, yes.
John?
Hunt, yes.
Marcella?
DeBlasi, yes.
Neil?
Odell, yes.
Tom?
Candon, yes.
Kim?
Hartman, yes.
Dan?
Rockmore, yes.
Lisa?
Christy, yes.
Rick?
Johnson, yes.
And Kelly?
Hersey, yes.
And McConnell, yes. So congratulations and welcome to all the people that we have just approved. And most notably, we have Deb Beaupre joining us. So Jay, do you want to do a brief introduction?
Oh, see here. He's muted.
He's muted.
Oops.
Jay, you're muted.
Jay, muted.
Oh my gosh.
He's committed. Jay, you're muted. I don't have power to unmute you.
I am so sorry. I said it's my pleasure to introduce Deb Beaupre. Sorry. I wonder why there was these blank faces. Deb, welcome. Congratulations and thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you. Good evening.
And my computer's about to die, so if you want to introduce yourself to the board and the administrators that are here, that'd be great.
Well, we've already had a party and done a few commercials for Amazon. But yes, my name's Deb Beaupre. I live in Meriden, New Hampshire. I've been teaching since 1992. How long is that? 28 years? So I've been in New Hampshire and Vermont. Currently, I'm serving as a principal of a little school called Cavendish Town Elementary. And if you've ever gone to Okemo, you might have passed it. And I'm excited to work with Julie and players to be named later. I'm happy to answer any questions if anybody has any.
We're thrilled to have you, and
Oh,
thank you
you.
for sticking through this late meeting. They're never this late, I promise.
Okay.
Well, except last time.
I was gonna say that's 2 in a row. We're 2
Hey,
in a row. We're at this
nowhere
right now.
near 11 yet. This is way shorter than last time.
Yeah, we
All
haven't hit 11:04 yet, to be exact.
Right. Any
true.
questions for Deb? I think we're all just excited to have you, Deb, and look forward to working with you more in the future.
Same. Thank you so much. Oh, and someone's written me a little note. Thanks. That's awesome.
That's Josh, our behind the scenes hero here tonight.
Gotcha. Yeah. Well, it was nice meeting you and also having fun chatting with people and being reminded by Justin that we are being recorded. And I hope to see you soon.
Great. And to be clear, that reminder was repeatedly for Julie, not Deb.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
All right. So if you have items for the next meeting, which will be June 23rd, please send them my way. And with that, I will take a motion to adjourn. Kelly.
Move to adjourn.
Excellent. Is there a second?
Second.
John. Awesome. All right. Thank you guys so much. 25 minutes earlier than last time. Look at me go.
Well done, Kelly.
Yay, consent agendas.
All
right.
Thank you guys.
Before 11, beautiful.
Oh.
Thanks, everyone.
I think if you
Take
made
care,
it off,
everybody.
that counts for this one.
Bye.
We'll call it
Thank
unanimous.
Thanks, Kelly.
Thank you guys.
Good night.